Rupert was just well. Sorry, this is the Kino came with 30, and I've just started recording. And Rupert was just pointing out that today, and I think today is it the 17th today.
It is.
That they've just recorded the highest temperature ever recorded on Earth, and it's in the room I'm sat in now, which was surrounded by box Nintendo games. That's actually in Death
heat
Valley.
Of the gold around you. Yes, Death Valley in California, apparently. So yeah, you would be parched. You would need some peach barley water.
I remember Robinson's Fruit and Barley, that kind of like what's the sort of pink coloured squash is the one drink I always had when I worked in a hotel and I had constant daily hangovers. It was the one drink that every morning I would just be clocking back pints of it because it was always on offer in the Co-op over on Silly. And even now when I drink it, it just takes me back to like some of the most fierce hangovers I've ever had. It's like It's not a fun. It's a drink it's a double-edged sword for me. Yes, it quenches my thirst, but it also gives me flashbacks to the worst times of my life.
Yeah, it's like yes, it quenches my thirst, and yet is it worth it for the massive triggered PTSD? I'm not sure.
Oh God, I tell you what, some of those days working in that hotel in the hot kitchen, I'm not gonna lie to you, but I wasn't going 100%. I wasn't at my best. I used to get in the habit of drinking a full milkshake in the morning because I knew I would be sick, and at least it would be kind of it would be like alkali, it wouldn't be acidic. When you're working around your vomit, you think I probably Carlsberg Export, really.
That's literally what my wife did when she had morning sickness. Was that she knew she was going to spew, so she decided to eat things that would taste nice on the way out.
That's a good call, actually.
Yep.
It's hard to believe that she writes for Cosmopolitan, really. I mean, with tips like that.
Yeah, she probably shouldn't have been drinking 12 pints in the evening, really. Probably would have helped. Of
battery acid. So that would be sharp. That you'd have to put a bit of blackcurrant cordial with that to take the edge off. Oh, by the way, I know we're slightly off topic, but
slightly
on the subject of drinks, there was a period in the Welsh Valleys where like a drink that people of a certain age would drink would be Bow and O, so that's Strongbow and orange squash.
Ooh,
and I had a sip of one once. It's absolutely foul. It's like it's curled in the glass. It's foul. I don't know.
Not even orange juice, just orange squash. Wow.
Yeah. So back on
the cocktail.
That's a Welsh cocktail, a wocktail. So I've got quite a few films to go through. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And they are Jordan Peele's Us, Come to Daddy, Awake, Closed Circuit, Loose, Escape Room, The Devil in the Woods, Hide and Seek, Under Suspicion, Deadfall, and The Witch in the Window.
Right.
Every time I say that, The Witch in the Window, I feel like my brain wants to say The Wind in the Willows, which is different.
It's quite a cool title.
The Witch in the Window.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a horror. It's going to be eerie, and Also,
I like film titles especially for horror movies, which are a little bit creepy and scary in themselves, like Don't Look Now or The Shining. They sound creepy in themselves. I like that.
Titles that make you say, right? Well, you think, okay, yeah. So, yeah, if there was a horror film just called The Exploding, you're like, oh, right, okay, that's just going to be people blowing up. So, what have you got on the menu for today, then?
Well, I'm sure we're going to mention Cybertracker at the start.
Oh God, I forgot about that. Yeah.
I have also got Out of Sight, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Tron, Triple Frontier, Leprechaun, 2012, Tomboy, Sightseers, The Prestige, and The Last Samurai.
There's a few there this is really good actually, because there's a few there that are really making my trousers tighten that I've been on the cusp of watching, so I'm intrigued. Shall we hurtle into Don the Dragon Wilson's 1995 classic Cybertracker?
Yes, if we must.
So this is a film made by, we're becoming very familiar with. Is it PM Entertainment?
It is PM Entertainment.
The successors of Canon.
Yeah. So this is it. PM being Joseph Meary and Richard Pepin. This one's directed by Richard Pepin. It's called Cybertracker. Made in 1994.
Oh, 94, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah. Followed naturally by a direct-to-video sequel. Hang on. I just read that off Wikipedia. The direct-to-video. Surely the first one was direct-to-video as well.
That was not. That they didn't even drive past cinemas. They didn't drive past cinemas to take that to Blockbuster. They only back roads, no cinemas. But yeah, so I don't know if you want to do the sort of a brief synopsis of what we sat through.
So it's set in the future. I'm not sure we ever really worked out when. We were trying to work it out. We were trying to work it out from when the Declaration of Independence was signed or something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, in the film, so what's his name? Don the Dragon Wilson. He works as sort of this part of this Secret Service team who are protecting this senator, and he is endorsing this computerized judicial system on behalf of a company, a very OCP-like company called Cybercore. And yeah, it's sort of like a RoboCop type idea. Basically, they're trying to bring in this like automatic justice system type thing. Naturally, it's all a bit unethical and dodgy. And he ends up falling in with this kind of group who are opposed to this human rights group, are opposed to this system being put in place, and he ends up fighting against the very people he once protected, the very corporate people.
Much like Dolph Lundgren in the film Men of War with Trevor Goddard.
Much like RoboCop 3, in fact, as well.
With Robert John Burke.
Yeah.
This was amazing on a few levels, mainly because of Don the Dragon Wilson's clothes. There was one point where you pointed out when he gets taken on the sort of side of the rebels, the human rights people, they give him clothes to wear because he's obviously been involved in a bomb blast and taken out one of these sort of very Terminator-esque robots that are becoming automated. And the clothes they give him, he just looks like an out-of-work painter and decorator. And Rupert rightly pointed out that his trousers were so wide. There was like zoot suit trousers. They were so wide. And then, but they'd been hemmed up, but on the inside, so there was no hem. So they looked crap, like someone who just bought cheap trousers and done them.
There was no sort of cuff at the bottom of the trousers. It was just obviously turned up, but underneath it was. The fact that this is the main thing we're talking about in this film shows that it wasn't that interesting. I mean, it was just very mediocre, really.
Well, the thing is, as we all know, we're on a hunt to find like a decent Don the Dragon Wilson film, and this came close but we realized what it actually was a kind of bog standard, passable action film around Don the Dragon Wilson. He still wasn't good. Wasn't good. He had no gravitas. The use of kind of like the superimposed images and very early CG and reused footage and stuff is fine. When it cuts to the kind of Terminator vision, they directly reference the T-1001 scene, which was a bit of a mistake. And the kind of, again, the martial arts combat isn't really there, although Richard Norton is in it.
Yes.
Who can usually depend on in these sorts of films. But again, there's something about the fight choreography. It was okay, but the big fight at the end between them, it was like so brief. And something weird happened. Something weird happened in that fight as well. I can't remember what it was now, but it just kind of ended.
Yes.
The fight just kind of, it all sort of warmed up and then, that's it then.
It was an odd one, that final fight, wasn't it? Because it was very built up, and then they do some pretty cool moves at the start. But then they have this weird thing where they both get really tired, and it's almost like they ran out of ideas for the choreography, and they end up just like taking... They take it in turns to swing a fist at each other, and that's it. Almost like they're going to be so exhausted that, they can barely fight anymore. But it's not much fun for us, is it? I mean, we don't really, in a film like this, we don't really think about whether people get exhausted or not. We just want them to keep fighting and do cool things. But it was very strange. Yeah, so it was a little bit unsatisfying all round, really. And of course, the fact that it's so heavily borrowed from the likes of RoboCop and the Terminator, as you say, directly referencing the Terminator, it's always a bad idea to directly reference infinitely better films.
which is something we'll be talking about when I talk about Escape Room later on, actually, which features
Right.
Sean Young, and
Blimey.
Skeet Ulrich. But yeah, it was the biggest, most fun we had, I think, with Cybertracker was the fact that we worked out his wife supposedly died in like 2014. This film was made in '94. He watches this ridiculous like scene where he gets really maudlin while he's drunk and watches old footage of his wife from CCTV in his home, but it's really low quality. But he's got like a sort of what's the word, like a voice commanded computer that he gets drunk, is like digitally drunk, and then kind of just hurls abuse at her. So, okay, it's not what I would do with a voice activated computer, but
just become an abusive husband.
And everything in his house is peach or salmon colored. Like when it goes into his flashback, so bloody hell, his clothes, everything, his clothes matches curtains, matches cupboards, matches ceilings, everything is peach or salmon. And also the constant use of like really outmoded 90s technology. The amount of times in that film that someone is looking at a TV or a voice call and it's 5 or 6 inches big on a table 25 feet away from them. They would be squinting. It's the best part of the film.
It's always the best part of these films is seeing how they imagine that future tech will look like, and it hasn't advanced in 25 years. It's just preposterous.
There's a bit where they got these like voice activated computers and stuff, and these like future cars which are just Saabs with tinted windows, and then he goes into like the Rebel base, and one of the guys has got an actual 5 3/4 inch floppy disk on his table.
Yeah,
like that would have been out of date in 1994 when the film was made, and this is a quarter of a century on. It'd at least be a ferric tape. So
yeah. My favourite scene, I think, was the bit where he's in the police station and the company is obviously like putting out a propaganda campaign against him, like framing him for some sort of murder or whatever. And his image comes up on all these like TV screens around the place, and it's clearly him, and he's just standing there surrounded by police officers everywhere. And it's a really long, protracted scene, which must go on for like 2 minutes of obviously his face on the screen. Obviously, people recognize him, and obviously the fact that he's standing there, and it just goes on and on. He's just standing there thinking, "Well, can I get away with this?" And it's like, no, you can't. You're in a police station.
You're in a police station, on all these huge screens that are up at weird heights and angles for everyone to look at, and they stop their conversations. And they look at the screen, they look at him, and he systematically looks at every group of police from this police station. It flicks back and forth, and then he just walks out, and then everyone looks at each other, and then runs after him.
Yeah, like, hang on, did I just see what I thought I saw? It's like, yes, you did. Right, let's move on for Cybertracker, because it's not worth our time. It's a very, very mediocre film.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's the best one we've seen of his so far.
Sadly, yes. Okay, do you want to begin with one of yours? Because I think if you've got 11, I've got 10. Then if you start, then that would make sense.
I think this is the first time I've beaten you on my film watching.
No,
You loser. So I watched Jordan Peele's Us this week on Now TV. My trial has ended, so don't expect any more from that.
Everything from now on is going to be made before 2005.
And be a TV series. So I watched it, and I did like this film. I was a big fan of Get Out, and I found this film like much more fun and like lighter in tone, which I wasn't really expecting. So for people who don't know about this film, it's sort of it's his second full length film, I think, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. And it's about a family who sort of go away to a beach home they've got, and they get attacked by what appears to be sort of doppelgangers of themselves. And I won't give away too much of the story because the fun of it is kind of seeing where it goes. But I found this quite funny, and my God, I got 5 on it in my head for a week. The song, what an amazing hip hop song! I must have listened to about 15. It's such a good song. So I really liked it. It's like I said, it's a bit lighter in tone. I found it quite funny, quite darkly funny. But I think it's one of those films that, whilst it's obviously really well made and a really interesting concept, whereas when I watched Get Out, I had a lot of interesting conversations with friends about what was sort of addressed in the film. Yep. With this, it felt much more. It felt very much aimed at an American audience, and it also felt. It was one of those films that when it finished, and I thought about it, I I had issues with how it went through its narrative.
Right.
It was a lot of. It's hard to talk about it without giving it away, but when it sort of explains what's happening in the film, and the machinations and some of the motivations of the characters in it, when you actually stop to think about how that would all work, it really falls apart very, very quickly. But when you're watching the film, it's fine because it's so well done that it just keeps you enthralled. But when you think about it after, it's actually quite ridiculous.
Well, that is the key, isn't it? To keep you enthralled while it's on. I'm not so bothered if a film falls apart afterwards, but as long as it's not falling apart before your eyes, I think that's the key.
Yeah.
So I know what you mean. It's very difficult to talk about Us without giving anything away, because I remember there being a point in that film where I was thinking, this is where a regular film would meet its conclusion. You see what I mean? And then, so it was really exciting, the fact that it was only like 45 minutes, an hour in. And I was thinking, well, where can it go from here? And I like the fact that it just goes into some very weird places. I know what you mean, though. It's not quite as, you can't quite pluck it out of the root in the way, like Get Out. It's like, it's very nakedly a kind of socially conscious film, and a political film in some ways. And it's very obviously about race relations, etc. It's not as clear what Us is really about as such in the same way. So there aren't so many of those sorts of conversations you can have afterwards. The conversations you have afterwards are more like, what did I just watch? Something.
Yeah. It was very much, whereas I think when I watched Get Out, I was completely swept along by it and thought that it was really interesting and like a really heavy duty, interesting film. With Us, it was very much about little set pieces and little scenes that happened.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it. But if I had to rank them, I would say that I did prefer Get Out. Maybe though, I enjoyed it so much, my expectations were quite high for this.
Possibly. And also perhaps the fact Us is such a strange and elusive kind of story, and with its themes and stuff, I wonder if perhaps it's going to take a while to one or a few more viewings perhaps to really comprehend it in a way, which is fine as well. Yeah, but it's very good and very unusual.
I think it would benefit from a rewatch where you're not kind of thinking, right, I'm just trying to keep up with this and see where this is going, when you're fully aware of how it all pans out, just thinking, right, now I can enjoy, I can look into this a bit more and see certain things.
Perhaps without the baggage of Get Out as well, going into this expecting something similar, which it really isn't.
No, not at all. But yeah, like I said, it's very darkly funny, and I got 5 on it by the Loonies. Oh my god, what a song! What a song!
Brilliant.
I went through a bit of a thing after it of listening to some 90s hip hop, which isn't something I normally listen to, but I was listening to a few bits and pieces, but I was like a madman just scrolling through Spotify. These are nothing compared to I got 5 on it. Just scattering the CDs around my desk. So yeah, I'm just going to stick with that one song, quite frankly.
Okay, that's going to be your entire hip hop experience, just that one song.
Just that and Big Willie Style on CD from 1997. That's fine.
Yeah. The CD single. Remember them?
3 tracks, 2 of them radio edits of the original track.
Well, one of them a radio edit and one of them a terrible Eurodance remix of a hip hop tune. where they've just sped up the lyrics, the vocals, and it just sounds slightly higher, faster version of the original vocal.
And they've got like a drum beat, boom, 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 behind everything. Yeah, that would really ruin getting jiggy with it if that happened. I wouldn't. Oh yeah. So yeah, that's Us.
That is Us. So, and that was on Now TV, wasn't it?
Now TV, yes.
Okay. Well, I will talk about Out of Sight, and this is on Netflix currently, and this is the story of a gentle bank robber played by George Clooney, who escapes from prison, and then he plans to steal uncut diamonds from this old white collar convict who he met in there. During the escape from prison, he has this encounter with a U.S. Marshal played by Jennifer Lopez, and the two have an instant rapport. And they basically they both become infatuated with crossing paths, even though he's quite clearly should be like just getting out of there, doing the job and getting out of there. He's kind of obsessed with meeting her again, and she is kind of obsessed ostensibly with catching him, but really they just fancy each other a lot. So yeah, there's and so it's quite a cool, sexy duo at the leading it, and then there's supporting roles for Ving Rhames, Steve Zahn, Dennis Farina, obviously, Don Cheadle, who's hilarious, and yeah. So this is Steven Soderbergh, and I remember when he made Sex, Lies and Videotape.
I noticed that you didn't mention Michael Keaton then.
I did mention Michael Keaton, actually. He does rock up in one scene, or maybe two scenes. As
Special Agent Ray Nicolette.
Yeah. Does he play the same role in, I want to say, Jackie Brown?
I think this is why I happen to remember his name, because I must have seen Out of Sight when it came out and not since.
Yes.
So I don't know why I remember his name, and it must be because of that bit of trivia.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it is the same character. But yeah, and yeah, he's very cool and very funny, because he's not a complete dick, but he's just a kind of he's a dick bubbling below the surface. But yeah, so yeah, Steven Soderbergh. Anyway, so he made Sex, Lies and Videotape in 1989. But then, to be honest, if you look at his filmography for most of the 90s, I mean, most of the films aren't really remembered. And then I remember I went to the cinema in 1998 when this was made, and I was not going to see this film. And I don't know. I look back and I try to work out what it was that I really wanted to see. But it was sold out, and I really can't see what it could have been when you could look at the other films around at that time. Possibly The Truman Show, not sure. Anyway, but so I just decided to randomly see Out of Sight, and it was a really, really pleasant surprise. And I remember being just really seduced by the fact that the two main actors are so gorgeous, and they had genuine chemistry. I love the cinematography, the editing, and David Holmes' music, which is just really cool. Really, really nice loungy trip hop type stuff.
Good.
And it's nice to watch it after 20 odd years and actually sort of be seduced all over again. So, yeah, so it's Clooney and Lopez are kind of the key, because they're kind of selling this idea that these two people could genuinely be in love based on a single kind of encounter. Yeah. And you believe it in large part because they're both so hot, but also because it's really hard, right, to write convincing dialogue for two people meeting and just getting along, right? So a lot of romance films, they'll take the shortcut of like they'll make love into some kind of mystical supernatural force, like they're meant to be together, or they'll have like an extreme situation that these two people go through, which is a threat to both their lives, and then afterwards they just like destined to be together in that way. But it's quite rare to see people presented in a way where they meet each other, get along really well, and really fancy each other, and then continue to get along. And that's why the romance is quite convincing, because that's how real life romance really works. People meet, get along, want to have sex with each other, and continue to get along. So anyway, yeah, so it kind of goes back to the old, I guess, the screwball romance type things of the 30s and 40s, where you put two people together into a kind of quite combative dialogue. And in this case, it's literally combative because, of course, one's a cop and one's a robber. So it does work really well. And what's good as well is that I know we've talked about Steven Soderbergh work on Ocean's films before. And the thing that put me off, some of you mentioned about the Ocean's films, is that they are really cool and seductive, yes, but there's very little peril involved in
Yeah.
them. And what I like about Out of Sight, which I think I would probably disappoint me about the Ocean's films, is that it does actually have some element of peril to it.
Is it still quite a light-hearted? I remember it being quite a light-hearted film because it's like a 12 rating or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yes, I think it gets the balance about right because he doesn't exactly have the roughest time in prison, but harsh stuff does happen in the prison, and most of it's related to stuff involving Don Cheadle, who's so funny in it because he's obviously a real proper gangster type, a real gangbanger, and he's like, he's got the bandana and stuff like that, and the way he talks is like gangster language, and yet he's clearly much more intelligent than he gives himself credit for. And he's so fast talking, and he's so kind of erudite. It's really funny to watch him talk in that way, but in such intelligent terms. And the dialogue is just really smart and very swift, and it's a very simple plot, really, but it's very much layered in tiny complications, which make it more interesting. And yeah, as I said, the music's really cool. It's just a really, really well put together film, and it still holds up. It doesn't feel in some, you get many films in the mid to late 90s which were trying desperately hard to be cool in a very Tarantino type way, and it doesn't really try and do that. It's much more earnest than Tarantino, and it doesn't feel like it's trying too hard to be cool. It feels effortless, put it that way. So
yeah, that's a problem. That was one of the problems I had with Seven Psychopaths. I watched it twice, and both times I just thought, stop trying to be cool. I felt like everyone in that film just had their tongue in their cheek and sort of trying to be quirky, and I wouldn't mind actually watching the film and not being distracted by this. Yes. I also look at You with a Big Empty with Simon Pegg and what's his name? David Schwimmer from the late 90s.
Oh, really?
Simon Pegg's American accent in that film.
Whoops.
I'm not going to say anything else.
Was it as good as his Scottish accent in Star Trek? That's the question.
I've never seen Star Trek. Actually, that's weird I haven't seen Star Trek because I fancy Carl Urban.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He's quite funny in it as well, Carl.
Apparently, as well, the game on the PS3 is supposed to be pretty good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really, I should just be a massive Trekkie fan by now.
Clearly. So that was Out of Sight, and that's on Netflix.
I think I've already did. Usually I go through these episodes and sort of write down choice parts of dialogue to use as a kind of non sequitur subtitle for the episode. But I think I've already decided on a dick bubbling below the surface because the image that conjures up is foul. So I'm going to use that. I've written it down. It's true. Everything I write down is real now. So much like the story of Cellar Dweller. So the next one I watched is Come to Daddy with Elijah Wood and Stephen McHattie, who I recognise instantly upon looking at, but I could not place him in any film. Does it name ring a bell to you?
No, although...
Type in Stephen McHattie.
Stephen McHattie. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
I literally thought, oh, I know you. And then I was trying to place him for ages. He kind of looks like a cross between like Scott Glenn and Lance Henriksen in this film. And then he's skinny.
Oh, this guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could not place him in a single film, but I recognized him the second I saw him. So yeah, Come to Daddy is a film where Elijah Wood. Well, Elijah Wood is amazing in this film. His personality, his hair, his clothes are especially magnificent, and it's kind of part of the plot as well. So the story is that Elijah Wood's got an estranged father. And he turns up at this really remote beach house, and to sort of reconnect with him because he's got this letter saying, I really want you to come and meet me. We've got a lot to talk about. And when he turns up, his father's obviously like a borderline alcoholic, and is really combative, and is really reticent to sort of tell him why he's there. And the film it's a bit of a kind of mystery thriller, and it goes off from that. But it's also got like a really dark comedy heart, and. I've noticed that Elijah Wood, I don't know if it's his production company that he has cast himself in, but he's in a lot of these really quirky, funny, dark films.
Yes.
That that I quite like because they're always 90 minutes. They've always got like an interesting little premise, and he always plays a similar character where he's kind of out of his depth and just like wide-eyed and not sure how to deal with everything. So that's funny. But yeah, I did like this film. A few other people turn up. Michael Smiley turns up in it, who will always own my heart for his part in Kill List, obviously.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just him sort of with his father trying to reconnect, but also trying to work out what's going on. And then obviously events kind of spiral out of control, and the film goes on from there. But it's just one of those films that's sort of hard to talk about really without giving anything away, because I think a lot of these mid-budget or low-budget independent thrillers, a lot of the fun comes from just seeing where they go.
Yeah.
So, but it's really pretty. The whole thing is the beach house he lives on. I was actually a bit jealous of, because he's got this like a veranda overlooking the ocean. It's surrounded by rocks and beach, and it's really isolated. And I thought, oh, that's actually really, really nice. That's a really cool place. And yeah, it's just a fun, brief, dark thriller about with some really funny comedic moments, especially the monologue and the very extreme circumstances that Michael Smiley gives at the end of the film is one of the funniest things I've ever seen or heard. So definitely worth a goosey.
Is Michael Smiley speaking his native Northern Irish?
His accent is thicker than me. Honestly, sometimes he was talking. I was having to kind of work out what he was saying. Good, because it's actual accent.
Yes,
and it makes the delivery even funnier at the end.
I know what you mean about like not wanting to give anything away in these sorts of smaller, like horrors and thrillers and stuff, because it's almost like they have the narrative freedom because of the size of their budget and stuff to do something unusual or surprising with the way the story goes. And that's quite exciting, really, when you get a well-made, smaller movie.
With good actors in, named actors who have a career.
Yes.
And I think it's almost like sometimes, like you say, they're working with these like, really small budgets. They've got this neat little funky script. And sometimes the kind of lunacy or the mystery of where the film goes is sort of the only trick up the sleeve. And it just seems a shame to just give that away and say, this is what happens. It's good. You should watch it. Because, I don't know, it just seems a shame.
Stephen McHattie, I know him from Pontypool. I think that's the main one that I know him from.
Which is in Canada, not in Wales.
Yes. And also, I realised that he's also in 2012, which I was going to talk about in a bit anyway. So I can't actually remember him in that film. But there you go.
But no, if you like tense sort of mystery thrillers, definitely give it a goosey. I had a really good time with it, and that was on Now TV. So I will never be able to watch it again because my trial.
It will never come to any other service. Yeah, so that's Come to Daddy. When you said Come to Daddy, I just thought of Aphex Twin. I just remember that horrible music video for Aphex Twin.
Yeah, it was.
Watch it if you haven't seen it. Grim. I'm not sure I could handle 90 minutes of that, to be honest. But yeah, okay, good. So next I have Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So
I don't normally say this, but why did you watch this film?
Because it was available on Netflix, and I haven't seen it in many, many years. Okay. It was, I don't know whether it was Tim Burton's first Hollywood film, but it was.
Really? I just assumed, because Pee-wee Herman, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I just thought this was just kind of like an American TV series that was made into a film, so I assumed it would just be crap.
Well, it kind of was. Yeah, it was that. I'm not sure what the Pee-wee TV show was like. But yes, it is. If it's almost like, right, okay, Tim Burton made Ed Wood, and that was his sort of love letter to 40s and 50s genre cinema, I guess. In some ways, this is Tim Burton almost harking back to the silent era tradition, because the opening sequence in particular, the first 10 minutes or so, is just Pee-wee interacting with his world and overacting and overreacting, and like it has all these little quirks, like when Pee-wee raps on someone's front door, the music will play along with the rapping on the door, sort of thing. It's very, very much like in the silent movie tradition.
It sounds a bit Mr. Beanie as well.
Yeah, it's somewhere between Mr. Bean and Jim Carrey, I suppose. Because it's a unique physical performance, and it is something that I guess Jim Carrey would continue this kind of physical comedy tradition a few years later, I suppose. And I don't think it's not a very popular style of comic acting today, I wouldn't say. And if anything, I'd say that modern comedy would tend towards more verbal and facial humor, really. It's not such a popular thing anymore. But anyway, so it's basically a road movie. You can tell it's taken from a TV series because the plot is extremely thin. Pee-wee's special bicycle has been stolen, and this psychic tells him it's in the Alamo. She's just making it up as she goes along. And she says, in the Alamo.
They all do, Rupert. Spoiler alert. They all do that.
Yeah. It is quite a funny scene, actually, because she's literally, like, he's just paid her a load of money, and she's literally just looking across the street at, like, street signs and stuff, and just coming up and, like, taking words from them and just saying, he's in the Alamo. And it's like, and then he instantly decides he has to travel all the way to Texas. But, of course, he's got no way of getting there, so he has to hitchhike. And it's basically all about the weird people he meets along the way. So Pee Wee Herman, if you're not familiar with the character, he's played by Paul Rubens, and Pee Wee's just a big kid, basically. And his main nemesis is also a big kid, really, played by Mark Holton, who's in the Leprechaun films, which I'll mention later. And nice. So you've got this Pee Wee's a big kid, but he's very innocent. And he's very, very positive about the world and everything. And the guy who steals his bike is just a kid, but he's a bully, really. So that's the kind of dynamic you got in the middle of it all. So as I said, it's really about the kind of weird people he sees along the way. And there's like, they're not really particularly connected or anything. It's just he will kind of learn something from each of them, or they will learn something from him. And I guess the key theme I never saw when I was a child watching this was that it's all about existential loneliness, really, because Pee-wee is basically opted out of society at the start because he keeps going about how he's a loner or a rebel. He's kind of quoting like an old Western or something like that. And in his journey is essentially he's discovering that everyone else a kind of micro level is a loner and a freak in their own way. So actually he does fit in, because if we're all loner rebel weirdos, then he has a place in society.
This seems like a film with a decent heart, from what you're saying.
Well, it is very big-hearted, and that's what's quite appealing about Pee-wee himself, is that it is a bit weird watching him just act like a child all the time, but at the same time he is he's very sweet-natured, so you can't really argue with it. He's not calculating in the same way that, like, say, one of Jim Carrey's characters might be, for example. He's just really naive. There isn't really much of the kind of gothic type stuff that you'd expect from Tim Burton. I mean, he went on to do what Beetlejuice would be after this, I suppose, and then Batman, of course. But although there is one extremely strange dream sequence involving like clowns and twisted corridors and someone dressed as Satan and stuff, so that's cool. And it's good because the film ends up with this very kind of enjoyable, slow moving chase sequence around the Warner Brothers studios, where he's on his bike, you're getting chased by people, and he's just crashing different movie sets like Godzilla, westerns, musicals, stuff like that. And also what I noticed this time around is there's only actually one child in the entire film, one actual child in the entire film, and he's a total dick. So it's an odd one because, yeah, I mean, it's sort of a kid's film, but
that's the entire representation of children in a microcosm.
Yeah. Yes, and going back to kind of what you're saying about the positivity of it, unlike, say, something like Return to Oz, which we talked about before, where it's like just a full-on horror movie, basically, none of the creepier content here would really upset kids. I mean, there's one pretty scary moment with this woman called Large Marge, with some cool stop motion monster effects. But other than that, it's pretty gentle, really. And it's just, it's all done with enormous kind of positivity and enthusiasm. And so it's a hard film to hate, although I'm not really sure what young people would make of it today, to be honest. So, but yeah,
does it embrace the fact that it was made in the 80s?
It's kind of out. It's a bit of a film out of time, really, because it's he goes to such odd little backwards type places. It's not really clear, and it's not evident any of the music or anything like that, because the score is by Danny Elfman, and it's very kind of whimsical score, and yeah, and any music that he listened to tends to be older. It's almost, his bicycle almost looks like something from the 50s. So it's almost like a nostalgia for a kind of subjectively more innocent time.
Quick question as well. You said they stole his magic bicycle. What's magic about it?
Not magic, just special.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah.
There's nothing actually magical about it at all. No, it's just a nice bike, and that's it. And it's almost like he's so positive and nice to people and means so little harm that when this bike gets stolen, it almost like breaks something in his mind, because it's like, how can anyone be so cruel to them? But yeah, so I think it holds up. Whether it would be of that much interest to someone coming to it anew, I'm not so sure. But if anything, it's just worth watching from the perspective of it being Tim Burton, and in a period when he was still making interesting films.
Hashtag sick burn. The next film I've got is a film from a few years ago called Awake, starring Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, and I think his name's Francesca Eastwood. It's Clint Eastwood's daughter. I didn't realize this until after I watched the film, and this is not a good film. This okay. Does the thing. Whenever one of my favorite genres of films are thrillers, like sort of thrillers where you think, oh, there's this kind of high concept, something happens, and you just sort of go with it. And sometimes Rupert, just sometimes, these films are crap. And this is one of them. So it's Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who I've got the last film I reviewed on this podcast with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers in was Black Butterfly with Antonio Banderas.
Yes.
And he was not very good in that. And I remember him being in From Paris with Love, which is a film I really dislike, and I found him quite bland in that. And I've come to the conclusion I just don't think he's got much screen presence. And he's also got in all of his films, he's got really dirty, bitten nails. And it's just unpleasant. It's like constant zoom-ins in his hand, and you're like, just stop nails, just clean them, or at least give them a scrub before you start filming.
He was in a good film called Velvet Goldmine, but again, he was surrounded by so much talent that I wonder if it was just a bad actor in a good film.
I am not usually a negative Nancy, but in this case, I
don't want to be a cynic.
So that's a Guillermo del Toro film, isn't it, from the mid-90s?
No,
that's Mimic. Hang on, was it even a Guillermo del Toro film? Was it?
It was, yeah.
Guillermo del Toro. Oh, it was.
He did it. I think he did it after Kronos, and I think it was like his Hollywood calling card type gig, and he massively regrets like most things that happened on that film, I think.
Is that I noticed that Mira Sorvino's in that film. Does she walk around tapping people on the shoulder saying, "I don't really fancy Robin Williams" in Final Cut? That wasn't real. There's a massive age difference.
They didn't address that. They should have done, frankly. It's part of the universe. In Awake,
the film starts off with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers driving high speed down a rural American dusty road. Love film set anywhere dusty, and he crashes the car and wakes up, and he's sort of comes out of a coma, and he's covered in bandages, and he has absolutely no memory of what was happening when he crashed. Unfortunately for him, there have been 5 murders of women getting attacked and killed, and in his car, one of them was found dead in his trunk. So he does look a little bit guilty. I'm not going to lie to you. And so you would think, oh, this is going to be a high tension film of him going to people, getting snippets of information and wondering, is he guilty? Is he not? But no, what it actually boils down to is him driving slowly around with the nurse played by Clint Eastwood's daughter, just being oddly hostile to everyone and making no progress in really, and his memory just comes back to him, and then it's just solved at the end. So it's a tedious print. William Forsythe is in this film as well, and he has put on weight, and he has dyed his hair, and he has dyed his mustache to match. So there was a lot going on. I do love William Forsythe's voice though, and when he's in these sort of thrillers, you always just think, "Are you guilty?" Because you're always a deeply unpleasant man. So that was cool. But the problem is with this film is just how boring the middle section is. It's the premise at the start, 5-10 minutes. You think, "Oh, this is interesting. You know what's going to happen here." But then it is literally about 50 minutes of him just driving around and people saying, "Oh, have you got your memory yet?" And him just saying, "No." And then looking at wind chimes on someone's porch and having like a really brief vision of something and then thinking, I don't know what that means. I got no context for that. And then going back to just hanging around, being bored, like I was watching the film. And when the film does at the end, when it sort of reveals its cards to the viewer, I thought, no, because like you say, instantly there are massive plot holes in the reveal.
Yes.
That as they were coming out of characters' mouths, I thought, no, I'm sorry, I don't accept this.
Yeah, this illuminates the problem we were talking about earlier, that it falls apart before your eyes rather than after you've seen it. Yeah, problem.
Yes,
definitely a problem.
It's very rare for a film to completely pull the rug from under a viewer's feet totally and completely blindside them, which is amazing. It can be an amazing feeling. Like, oh, okay, this is cool. But when it doesn't wrap up, it's instantly got problems. And in this, it's got fundamental problems that when the reveal happened, I instantly in my mind went back to the start of the film and just thought, no, then this whole boring film is just based on something that isn't even held together in the film's own internal logic. So it's really one to avoid. It is a boring thriller.
Sounds like you had trouble staying awake during this one.
I'll edit that out. So what film have you watched now?
So what was that? Actually, was it called Awake, right?
It was called Awake. I can imagine. Do you know
that sounds like it's got an alternative title somewhere. You know, it has.
Gonna say, that's got about 3 or 4 titles.
Yeah, they've tried out a 3 or 4 when it's been re-released.
Yeah, so it's just bad. It's just a bad film. Okay. Whatever title, changing the title would not help.
No, changing the title doesn't change the content. That's what I say. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on then from Jonathan Rhys-Meyers.
I've got to say, right, that film was so boring that I almost just thought, I don't think I want to watch a film with you in it again, because I said a few times on this podcast, I think for me, the worst crime a film can commit is to bore me, because that is not what I want. So yeah, I just think he's got no gravitas. It's like Jeremy Renner. So
yeah, it's almost, it's like it's the C. Thomas Howell effect, isn't it? You know, however good a film might look, as soon as you see his name, you just think it's going to be worse because you're in it.
Yeah.
And let's face it, none of his films look good anyway. So, except The Hitch.
So,
let's talk about Tron then. Okay. This is on Disney Plus.
Is this the remake or the original?
This is the original.
Nice.
Okay, so the plot, if you can fathom it. So in the real world, this guy called Flynn, his played by Jeff Bridges, his game programs have been stolen by another programmer called Dillinger, played by David Warner, obviously, who used those ideas to basically bolster himself, and he becomes CEO of this company called Encom. Now, the evidence of this theft is deep in the computer network. So Flynn dives into the computer, the mainframe, as the avatar Clue. In order to hack the system, he has to overcome this thing called the Master Control Program, which is basically a sentient AI which is running the place. So Flynn, or as he's known, Clue, is helped by his friends, a lady called Yori and another guy called Tron, and they're basically avatars of his real world friends, sort of thing. So
played by who? Sorry,
uh,
I've never seen Tron, so I'm completely.
I'm not sure about the woman. The Tron is played by, I want to say, Bill Boxleitner. I think it's something like that. He does return in Tron Legacy. I'll have to check. I'll have to check the pronunciation. But and yeah, so basically they're trying to. And Tron represents this kind of security device, which is the key to unlocking the truth about this corporate theft in the real world. So in the kind of Avatar world, it's a very stylized world and of like computer graphics and stuff, very very stylized computer graphics, and they use obviously very early computer graphics as well because it's 1982. They use and they kind of use these laser disc things to throw at each other. They have these light cycle chases, and they're attacked by these polygonal kind of attack robots called recognizers and classic kind of wireframe tanks and stuff. So basically you've got kind of two parts of the films. You got the real world stuff, which is maybe a quarter of the film, and that's really about the kind of, I guess it's reflecting the kind of IP battles that you would have seen in the early console wars. But then in the actual in the kind of virtual world, it's more about this master control program, which is like this insane authoritarian creature, and he's on a mission to suppress any talk amongst the avatar population of these mythological, almost religious entities called users. And of course the users are players in the real world, so it's quite a cool idea that the avatars in this virtual world, their kind of thoughts are suppressed of these existence, these possible like players outside the world. So anyway, so he's like a crazy communist tyrant policing any kind of imaginative thought. But I think it's amazing, this film, not necessarily because it's an amazing film. I just think it's amazing that this was made in 1982, right? But yeah, apparently Steven Lisberger, who came up with the idea, he thought of this in 1976, right? He saw the game Pong, right? And he started coming up with this idea. So he's someone who's seen the game Pong, and we know how basic that is, right? And then he's then taken that seed of an idea and envisaged what is effectively a massive avatar-driven MMO, really. And it's really hard to overstate how far ahead of its time that really is, because it's not just about, oh yeah, you know, like early kind of CG. I mean, the idea of this, like a kind of massively multiplayer thing, which is all connected, is just incredible to me. But you know, even James Cameron hadn't made the Terminator, which was obviously about rampant AI and stuff. So, and of course, Cameron made something similar in Avatar, like, however, what was that, 30 years later, almost, which was
for those people who listening to this who aren't familiar with video games. Pong is such a basic video game. You can actually run it on a Voodoo 3 graphics card on a Pentium 2.
Possibly. You only need 4 megabytes of RAM, I think.
Yeah, and if you press minus, you can just get the screen down to postage stamp size to get the frame rate up a bit as well. It's fine.
Get it up to 60. Yeah. So most of the cyberspace stuff is kind of green screen, I guess, and it's a weird combination of special effects in this movie, because most of the cyberspace stuff is like green screen, but the costumes are mostly rotoscoped, right? And you know what rotoscoping is? It's where they go through every single frame and draw over the image, and of course, and then you've got the backgrounds. They're kind of animated paintings, I guess, like matte paintings, but mixed with CGI. So the art design is so stylized in this movie. It doesn't look dated in the way that other sci-fi films of the period definitely are. And it's interesting that the techniques like used in the film, especially the rotoscoping and that, they were so kind of grueling and time consuming. It's the only film which ever used them. So, which is why Tron looks so unique today. There's nothing else, literally nothing else like it, because they just thought it's just not worth it. I'd say the film's flaws are mostly in its storytelling. It's strange how much it stumbles in just telling a pretty straightforward story. And that's coming from a time now when the idea of avatars and online worlds are quite commonplace. God knows what kids would have made of it at the time, trying to get their head around this idea of like two parallel universes and stuff.
Is it aimed at children then, the film?
I think it's one of those films where it is the kind of thing that perhaps slightly older children would have had back then. For children today, I think it would be a little bit too cerebral and perhaps a little bit too slow. But yeah, it's still just inherently a little bit confusing, and it's not helped, of course, by the fact that every character has two identities and two names. So, because they're throwing these names around, and you're like, yeah. Wait, which one's there? And
sounds like a thing.
Yes, it's quite brief, 90 minutes tops, very fast moving. The visuals are mesmerizing. The only thing I guess that is missing in terms of what we really look for in a sci-fi movie like this is a proper synth score. It doesn't have what you'd want. Like, you look at Tron Legacy, and obviously Daft Punk worked on that and it's very synthy sounding, but there isn't really anything like that in this, which is a pity. But yeah, I mean, thing is, I only watched Tron for the first time a few years ago, so I don't come at it with any nostalgia. It's not like I was around the first time, but I'd happily watch it again. I think it's really good fun, and even though it makes really hard work of telling a story, I think that the visuals and just the world it creates are so strange and mesmerizing that...
And so forward-thinking as well.
Yeah, ridiculously forward-thinking. And, of course, combined with that, you do get... the times it does trigger a certain amount of nostalgia is seeing, like, old tech. And, the kind of hacking that they do in this film is ridiculous. Like, they obviously tapping into green screen computers. And there's no like coding or anything like that. They're literally just typing in stuff. Like, it was like the equivalent of just typing "hack the Pentagon" and it doing it, sort of thing. It's quite ridiculous. But yeah, it's good. I liked it a lot. Very strange, and yeah, I'll no doubt watch Tron Legacy for next time.
I will. I think I will watch Tron at some point. It's just a question of yeah, because it does strike me as, because I want to watch. There's a documentary called, I think it's called High Score or something, on Netflix at the moment that a lot of people have been messaging me about to watch, because I don't mind video games, and I think that would slot in really nicely, because it's a niche genre, isn't it, of video game films that are fundamentally about the video games themselves and not about a specific one. Otherwise, I just watch Uwe Boll's back catalogue.
Yeah, and Jeff Bridges is really good, and he's kind of a cocky git, but I mean, he's sort of cool and charming. So it's nice to see, because I think a lot of people would know Jeff Bridges from more recent stuff, like post Big Lebowski and stuff. But it's weird to see him as like not quite a teenager, but definitely a young buck. So that is Tron, and that's on Disney Plus.
So Tron is good. I watched a film called Closed Circuit, which is not good, unfortunately. I'm just going down in order here. Closed Circuit it's a film starring Eric Bana and Rebecca Hall. And when I put this on, it's called Closed Circuit, and on Netflix, the thumbnail looked quite sort of explosive. And the story is about a man who is arrested for a bombing. It's all set in London. Is arrested for a bombing, and it makes out through the description that it's Eric Bana is sort of his lawyer that is trying to prove he's innocent, and is working with Rebecca Hall. And there's a sort of a cover-up that they're trying to unveil. But the way it's filmed is it's like a really drawn-out, long, boring televisual drama. So there were points when I was watching it, and Eric's British accent is okay. It does stumble a little bit, but it is better than most, because I think he's Australian. But the problem is that it's just so bland. It's just like an hour-long episode of like Prime Suspect or something. So I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, this doesn't need to be a film. This is like a BBC drama, and there's which is. It's not bad in and of itself, but it seems so misplaced. I'm watching it thinking I expected a film, and this is so... It's got it's interesting the things it's trying to bring up.
Yeah.
Bringing in the government and the extent Jim Broadbent's in it, so you know he's dodgy from the second he rocks up on screen. And it's interesting that the extent that the government and these shady corporations will go to cover up their mistakes and things, but it does it in such a boring way. And of course you've got the inevitable bubbling love under the surface between the history of Rebecca Hall and Eric Bana's character.
Right.
And there's a moment in it about halfway through where you can tell they kind of insert a chase sequence. Riz Ahmed is in it as well, who's a handsome man. Just to try and ramp up the stakes a little bit, but it's not enough, and it just ends up feeling like a 45-minute episode of some British drama series from the 90s, just stretched out to 90 minutes. So
the age difference between Eric Bana and Rebecca Hall, that feels like it's quite great. Is that?
It doesn't come across. She doesn't look too young, and he's obviously like a handsome, fit man. It doesn't come across as too ridiculous. I think it's made a few years ago as well, so it wasn't jarring. And she's quite a strong character in it. It's not like
she's got quite a mature look anyway.
Yeah. She's not like swooning in his presence. She just have a strong character in it. But yeah, it's if you are happy to sit through that kind of thing. But for me, it just felt like it should have been an episode of a TV show.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Eric Bana at times. I think he does creepy characters better than good guys, to be honest. I've found.
I'm trying to think. I only really know him from the Hulk film he was in, and another film he was in. I'm going to talk about. So yeah, the last thing I want to say about Closed Circuit is it's an interesting concept in how I like it in films where it's sort of legal snags or certain situations, and you get a handful of people or a small person up against a huge corporation. In this case, the British government, and they're so entrenched in corruption, they're in a situation where you think we can't fight this. It's just far. But it just does it in a relatively uninteresting way, unfortunately.
Oh, that sounds dull.
But I did like Eric Bana in this. Again, this is the first or second film I've ever seen him in, I think.
Right.
Enough to watch another film, which we'll talk about later on, called Deadfall.
Okay. Bruce Boxleitner was the guy in Tron. He plays Tron, not Bill. Bruce Boxleitner.
You're thinking of Bill Bixby.
He is Bob Balaban. No, he is. I think he's mostly a TV actor, to be honest. But he's very handsome, and he's key age now because he's about 70, so good. Right. Okay. What are we moving on to next? What happens next? Triple Frontier is next, which is on Netflix. I think it might even be a Netflix original.
It's a movie.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty high budget. But anyway, so this is a film which is ostensibly similar to Da Five Bloods, which we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yes.
This is this time it's a group of middle-aged veterans head into Colombia to take out a drug lord and steal his money, basically, because they feel they've been mistreated since leaving the army or whatever. They feel they've been mistreated and they have been underpaid, and they've all got awful jobs and stuff. So they think, right, let's go and get what we're kind of owed, if you like. So anyway, all they need to do is go into Colombia, infiltrate this mansion, steal the money, and then escape over the Andes in a chopper so they can get back to the Caribbean. It does not go to plan.
The Dick, McDowell's, all the Andes, really.
Exactly. I thought it would be pretty easy in a helicopter, but there you go.
Clambering over Andy McDowell on the sequel. Fantastic.
It doesn't go to plan anyway. And they need to get home by other means, all while dragging 100 bags full of cash, and all while being hunted by this drug lord's troops. It's directed by J.C. Chandor. He made the very good All Is Lost, which I know you like as well.
Yes,
the Robert Redford one. Yeah, and the also pretty good, if slightly dense, Margin Call, which was a film about the 2008 crash. They're good movies anyway, and quite different movies. And this is quite different again. It's an old school kind of action adventure, really. Early on, I did think it was going to be one of those quite worthy and slightly wearying South America thrillers like Sicario, but it's more fun than that, and a bit more exciting. So more like Sicario 2 then, really. Yeah. Really good cast. Various people. You've got Oscar Isaac. You got Ben Affleck. Who else is in it? Some pretty good actors, anyway. They are a little bit interchangeable. Garrett Hedlund's in it as well. He's quite good. Yeah. So anyway, they're a little bit interchangeable. But it is essentially a group of dudes who I fancy, so that's fine. And unlike other films of this type, right? Getting the band back together, sort of type things, and they go and do this job. They are genuinely professional about it, and they don't simply argue for the sake of it. So
thank God.
That is a key point, because often in these films it will be like just unnecessary arguing for the sake of it, just to create some sort of drama. But I think that it's a smart enough script that that the drama comes out of, first of all, what it is they're actually doing in the first place, which is quite a dangerous thing, and then later the kind of extreme situation that they're in, obviously trying to escape and not die, for example. So yeah, there is literally nothing new in the film at all. It's like a jigsaw of ideas from other movies, really. There's the kind of the getting the group back together bit. You got a mansion assault scene. You've even got this this woman who they meet, who's kind of involved in the plan, who kind of represents a higher moral purpose to what they're doing. So it's not just them stealing money; they also want to do it so they can get her out of the life, sort of thing. And that's fine. So there's nothing new, but it's interesting and quite unpredictable when a movie draws on multiple kind of genres. So it's not just a run and gun action movie, but it also takes inspiration from the likes of Sorcerer, the William Friedkin film, cool. Which I suppose by extension means Wages of Fear as well, and some of the survival movie kind of tropes. And they don't all make it back. Not really a spoiler, but it's not too predictable who the unlucky ones are going to be. You see what I mean? So they get a few pretty simplistic moral decisions to make along the way, and it's quite a cool kind of motif. The fact that they're dragging all this money behind them, and it's almost like each decision they have to make is always a kind of balancing act between, right, okay, we're going to have to dump the money or some of the money here. So they're almost like shedding it as they go along in order to make that sacrifice in order to do other things. So it's quite a cool little visual motif of having the money dwindle as they go. And there aren't too many dull campfire conversations.
It just ends with Ben Affleck finally getting over the mountains with like a $5 in his pocket that blows off in a gust of wind. He's like, oh, well, that was a waste of time.
Yeah. It's nicely shot, clearly edited, good, well acted. I think Charlie Hunnam is another of the dudes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Bit limited, but again, sexy. So yeah, fun.
Does he look a little bit like Channing Tatum?
Yes.
Oh God, yeah, he's in Deadfall as well. I recognize.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's good kind of geography in the action scenes because some of them are quite elaborate and they do rely on knowing where people are in relation to each other. It's a simple thing, and yet so many films fail to achieve it. Not sure it would really hold up to repeated viewings, but it is enjoyable while it's happening. It's fine. It's a decent movie.
Is it it's an action film, effectively?
Yes, with a certain amount of existential angst along the way, I suppose. But nothing doesn't drag it down too much. I mean,
this is very much Ben Affleck's wheelhouse at the moment, isn't it? With stuff like the accountant thing, these kind of films that have a little bit more to them than just a straightforward action film, and yet there's enough action in it for me to lick my lips.
Yeah,
so
he's quite well suited to this role because he's got this sad Affleck look on his face all the time, but there's a reason for it because he is having a bit of a rough time. But he's kind of the de facto leader of the group, and he is quite authoritative. So yeah, it was good. I enjoyed that. So that's called Triple Frontier, and it's on Netflix.
Netflix. I think that and Out of Sight are two that I'm clearly going to be watching this week that you mentioned, because Out of Sight I need to refresh, and Triple Frontier, that's I'm very much in the zone for that sort of stuff at the moment.
Good.
The next one I'm hoping you've seen, because the way I watched it, I was in work on lunch, and Faye put it on behind me, and usually the films she watches I kind of like glance around, but I'm not too bothered. But this one, Loose. Have you seen this?
Is this what spelt like Luce or loose as in loose women?
No, Loose, Luce, with Tim Roth and Naomi Watts.
No, I haven't seen it. I've seen it around, but I've not viewed it. Tim Roth and Naomi Watts, you said?
Yes, as they were in Michael Haneke's Funny Games as well as a couple. And they're a couple in this. I'll tell you what then, it's a bit of an unusual one for the podcast, but that one I'll park it for the moment, because I kind of half watched it, and I was hoping that you would have seen it as well to carry the fat of the conversation. Fill in the blanks. Fill in the blanks when I was actually working. Okay, then. I'll just say that Loose, I really liked it. So I won't say anything more, but it's a good film. And we'll talk about that maybe a few weeks down the line.
Where is that available so that I can?
I think it's either going to be Prime or Netflix. Okay. So I'm going to say Netflix.
Okay, 50-50 chance.
It's good because I'll replace Loose with another film I saw at the end of this anyway that I realised I'd forgotten to write down. Another film I saw, this is a 2-minute, quite frankly, is called Escape Room. It's one of 3,000 films that have been made in the last 5 years called Escape Room. This one is from 2019, and this is the one that stars Sean Young and Skeet Ulrich in supporting roles. It's a film about two irritating couples who constantly bicker, one of them is a video game reviewer, but my heart was not with him because he's not like us, but he's irritating. And he's got to review this new escape room, a physical escape room that he goes to. But the sting in the tail is that Skeet Ulrich has had a few bad seasons in this escape room that he runs. So what he does, he goes to he goes to Needful Things, but Christopher Plummer isn't working behind the counter, and he sees this box called the Skull Box, which is a box shaped like a skull. And Sean Young works behind the counter and tells him that I'm not going to sell it to you because when you open that box, a demon comes out and possesses someone, and then basically says, "Oh, what's that over there?" and then leaves a load of money in the counter and runs out with it and puts it in the room as part of the puzzle. I knew there were going to be problems when Sean Young gets distracted and he nicks the box. She's on the phone and she makes a direct reference to Gremlins. She says, "Oh, hello, Needful Things," or whatever it's called, and then she says, "No, just don't give it water and don't feed it after midnight." And I thought, don't do that. Don't do that. So the film, it takes place with again these two couples, and one of them looks startlingly like Charlie Brooker, and they're in a British satirist. For anyone who's not sure,
is it Charlie Brooker and Connie Huck?
That would be amazing. I would have enjoyed it more were it that case. So we've done escape rooms, right? You've done an escape room with me, I think. And so it's sort of a horror themed one, and they go in there, and it's the usual thing: find keys, unlock codes, and stuff. And the twist is there's a guy, an actual man in kind of like a serial killer sackcloth overalls there, and he's attached to a chain in the corner of the room. And there's 55 minutes they've got to solve it, and every 5 minutes the chain gets extended so he can eventually get to them, effectively kill them, and if they don't escape, and end the game. Of course, what happens is someone opens the box as part of a puzzle, and the demon possesses the guy in the corner, and when they go near them, he actually kills them. So it's initially, you think, again, right up my Strasse, a little 80-90 minute film that's just set in one room, high concept, boom, off you go. But it is just beset by constant bickering. and stupid plot points. Quite often it'll just cut back because the CCTV in the room goes out. And I would say the film spends a good 15, 20 minutes just cutting back to Skeet Ulrich panicking, thinking, I hope they're all right in there because I don't want to call the police because I got a lot of money riding on this review. And it's just uninteresting. They could have just shown that once and then actually got down to the nitty-gritty. But and constant, like really basic puzzles that they just seem to spend hours trying to work out. Because the escape room itself, if you remove like the horror element from the film, the escape room itself is actually, you'd probably be out of there in 10 minutes. if there wasn't this guy in there trying to kill them. It's a trashy, short, high concept sort of horror thriller, but it does all the things that I dislike about these. It has no relatable characters. Every character is irritating. They're constantly bickering, and you just think, I just can't wait for you all to die. I want that chain to snap, and I don't want him to kill all of you, then jump out of the TV and kill me. But it's just not yet. So when it finished and it kind of set itself up for like a sequel, and I thought, no. They're trying to
revive a kind of Saw type experience or something.
It's not that, because...
Or is it not that brutal, I suppose?
It's not that brutal. It's because it's such a sort of real confined space. And also, another thing that really irritated me about this film is when people get killed and they're in this tiny room, which is effectively the size of my game room, they're obviously just lying on the floor dead for the whole film. So I'm assuming just so they didn't have to constantly worry about seeing the actors in the background when they're not there if they've moved. Everything is kind of shot really close up from the waist up. So it's always really... and it doesn't come off as a sort of claustrophobic part of the film. It comes off as really cheap. Like, if we just film the person who's talking, then we don't have to worry about set dressing, effectively, if that person's not in that day. And it just becomes really unpleasant to watch. And again, it's not...
Close-ups need to be used sparingly.
Yes.
They need to be used sparingly and deliberately. You can't just think to yourself, it's a good way of saving money, whatever.
I'll just fix this problem by zooming in, by rotating my lens slightly. So it's not... I mean, if you chucked it on, maybe if you had a horror night and you chucked it on with a few friends around, it's brief enough to kind of check on, spot a few of the references and have a bit of fun. But if you're sitting down as someone who wants to watch like a decent horror thriller, it's not worth it at all.
God, that sounds challenging.
Although I will say that Skeet Ulrich has aged really well. He looks the same. So it's and in fairness, I liked him in Scream, and it's just cool to see him in another film. It's a shame it was this one.
Yeah, he was all right in Scream. He was quite sinister. Yeah. Okay, I won't watch that then. What was it called again? I've already forgotten. Escape Plan. Room.
Escape Room. Escape Plan. Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger rocks up with Sylvester Stallone. Escape Room, but there are 3 or 4 films called
I know. I've seen this before. Like, you search for Escape Room and so many come up, and it's like, how do I know which of these is good? Or perhaps, are any of them good?
Well, I've watched 2 of the 3 or 4 now, and the answer to that is no, none of them. Although the other one called Escape Room, which I think is from 2018 or 17, is better than this because that is more like Saw. Like that other Escape Room, which I can't remember. You just have to search for it. But the one from 2017, 2018 is one where it's called Escape Room, but it's a serial killer who's put them in this kind of labyrinth of rooms, and that's at least more interesting, at least more horror in it.
Right. Okay. And what was this on? What service?
One day I will remember to make a note of this. It was. I know this. It was on Amazon Prime.
Okay. Well, from one bad horror to another, Leprechaun. Leprechaun is available on Prime. It was made in 1993, just before Jennifer Aniston started in Friends.
Just before she had a nose job.
Yeah, I was looking out for the nose. Actually, I don't know. I couldn't tell. Maybe there was. I don't really. I remember it being a thing, but I haven't seen the film in so long. I get it. I kind of conflate it with a character in Friends who obviously does have a proper nose job, and I can't work out whether it's true or not. Like that she had a nose job. Anyway, so this is about mischievous, evil leprechaun, played by Warwick Davis, who is looking for his pot of gold. At the start, he's locked in a crate by an old couple who die, and leave the house empty. Obviously, empty, but for him. and Jennifer Aniston and her dad move into the empty house, and they accidentally unleash the leprechaun from this crate. Cue a bunch of lame slasher and chase sequences. It's a comedy horror, which isn't funny or scary. So there's that. Mark Holton, who was also in Pee-wee, is in this, and he's playing another childish klutz. The fact that he's one of the more sympathetic characters doesn't bode well for the rest of it, to be honest. Jennifer Aniston plays, her character is this kind of spoilt LA brat, and she's just flirting with the young guy fixing up the house. She can't really show her comic timing because the writing and the direction is so poor. And sometimes I think, when you know someone has become a good actor, or in this case, a talented comic actor, and you sometimes convince you look back at the early performance, which is bad, and you convince yourself that you're better than it's better than it is, when actually it probably is just a bad performance. And if she hadn't gone on to be famous, then you probably wouldn't have noticed her. But yeah, I mean, you don't go back to the original Death Wish and just think, oh, that Jeff Goldblum, he had a career ahead of him. There's one bit I did laugh at, which is where the leprechaun is stopped by the police in his toy car. And the cop says to him, "Aren't you a little bit young to drive?" And he says, "No, I'm 600 years old." So that was quite funny. But it wouldn't survive Mark Como's 6 laugh test, this movie. Was it 5 laughs? I can't remember. Anyway, the only real...
for 90 minutes and at one moment go, ha! That doesn't count as a funny film.
Yeah, relative to all the other terrible jokes. The only real plus point to everything is Warwick Davis, because he is quite amusing. It's a really malevolent, cheeky performance, and the makeup is pretty good. So
I watched this as a kid, and it did terrify me. And I remember him being really sort of maniacal and just completely balmy. But
he's much better than anything else in the film. The film makes the cardinal horror movie sin of not being clear about the limits of the monster's power. So there are certain things he can do which are clear, right? He can mimic voices to confound people, fine. But then other times he can transport across the room instantly, for example. Another time he reaches through a phone, as if it's something supernatural. At one point he tears the door off a car, but then another time he can be easily subdued in a fist fight. So it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things which it's not consistent with its own rules. I mean, they're all kind of legitimate monster talents in their own right, but you can't show these things and then have him forget the skills in other situations, because it really messes up the sense of peril about it if you're not really clear on what he's capable of. So, I mean, he may say, "Oh yeah, but it's only a laugh, it's only a joke horror," but it is a comedy horror. It has to put in the work to have the horror element, I'm afraid. And given the complete absence of funny jokes, then it really should have leaned into the horror. It's really poorly directed, ill-conceived, and just a bit boring, really. So that is Leprechaun. And, I mean, it's spawned sequels, I believe, which I believe
one of them is Leprechaun in the Hood and Leprechaun in Space, the third and fourth. I don't know what the second one was called. I'm tempted to watch them because I really like Warwick Davis.
Yes.
And if you've seen the first one, which I think is the only one I've seen, but as we all know from Critters, a film that you produced, anytime any horror film goes into space, it's bad. If it's part of a series of films.
Right. Yeah. I'll let you do the Lord's work on that one.
I must admit, I did crap out of Children of the Corn after the third film because I just thought, I'm not watching another 7 of these on the trot. It's like, I mean, a load of dicky kids dicking around in a cornfield. 10 films. I mean, that's at least 15 hours worth of footage of watching bubbly corn on the cob.
Literally, not one of those kids went in that hood or into space, so you're not really going to watch them, are you?
There is one scene in the second film where someone presses the space bar on a keyboard, but that's about as close as it gets. I watched.
One of them wears a hoodie.
I watched The Devil in the Woods, which is again another awkwardly titled film where it's a film in 2020 is being released called The Devil in the Woods, but this is a film with Stephen Moyer in from I think 2012 or 13. There's a lot of horror films this week. So this film is set. It's set in the modern day, and Stephen Moyer plays the sort of patriarch of a family with his own British accent, which is so plummy that I thought it was being like affected, but no, that's his accent, which is fine. But at least he is using it. So it's Stephen Moyer and his wife, and they've got two children, like a teenage daughter who I thought, are you a teenager? And when I went online, no, she's 24, and a young sort of 6-year-old son, and I am pretty certain that no one in this film acts as a human person would in the circumstances they're in. So the story is that he is someone who sort of eschews technology, and he just, his daughter's always on her phone, and his son's on her phone, and his wife's on her phone, and he's really jealous. He's always suspecting her of texting men and stuff. So he says, I want to scatter my father's ashes. I want to go back to the campsite that we went to as when I was a kid, and scatter his ashes there because I've got really fond childhood memories there. And his wife's like, yeah, that's fine. Now, what actually happens is on the drive there was a scene at the start where Stephen Moyer's driving, and his wife, bear in mind, they're just driving to a campsite, right, in a car with no music on. He's just sat there driving, obviously for hours into like Middle America or some massive forest, and his wife is just like sort of texting on the phone. His son is sleeping in the back, and his daughter is just looking out of the window, just listening to music on an iPod, right? Probably an iPod Classic. And he stares at his daughter just because she's using technology with such malice that he almost crashes the car. And I thought you wouldn't be angry at your two kids for being quiet. You're like, and the music's like really ramping up. And I'm, what?
And presumably he bought that for her.
So I was like, why are you so angry? So he turns up at the campsite. He sees a deer that's got like his antlers missing, and it's been like disemboweled on the way. It's CG, but you see a flick of it, so it's not too bad. Okay. And he goes to the campsite and describes what he's seen to this guy, and the guy says, oh, there's a guy in a cabin around here, and he's got this barbed wire electric fence, and quite often we see animals that get caught up in it and they have horrific injuries. Sorry, you and your family had to see that. And he's like, oh, okay then. So that's explained, right? So that's fine. That's explained. He goes to the campsite and he walks in. Obviously, this is a huge, like, sort of national park where you can camp anywhere or whatever. And he walks into this clearing, and there are a load of teenagers smoking weed, like young couples just snogging, people just boozing and stuff, smoking fags. Oh, he sets up his tent. He gets, and I thought, why not just, like, you're there explicitly to have some time with your family. Why would you set up here? And
this sounds a bit like that Eden Lake film. The one with Michael Fassbender?
Oh, I haven't seen this.
Well, it's not that. It doesn't sound that similar, but it's similar in terms of like there being some ne'er-do-wells at the lake. Anyway, go on.
Sorry, so I am going to go through this in quite minute detail because it was astonishing. So they set up camp there, and of course, within 5 minutes, everyone is just pissing him off because they're just smoking fags, and he's got his son there. So this kid gets up who's just really irritating and 16, the kind of person that if he had the chance in this film, he would walk backwards in front of a group of people as he was telling a story. That kind of person. And he's walking around the campfire telling this scary tale. Bearing in mind, there's like a load of people around this campfire, this communal campfire. And he tells this really scary tale about this like witch in the woods that had a child that was deformed and drowned it in a lake, and everyone's all scared. And then one of his friends dressed up comes out of the woods and just scares the shit out of Stephen Moyer's 6-year-old son, right? The only child there. And Stephen Moyer stands up and says, can you not do that? He's 6 years old. He's already scared. Can you just wind it in a bit and have some respect for everyone else here? And I thought, oh, good work, Steve, actually, yeah, because that would really piss me off if that was my, because his son's crying. And everyone just says, oh, stop being a dick. And then everyone just starts shouting at him, including his own family and his wife. And I thought, I think he was pretty sensible there. That was like the one moment in the film that was believable. So anyway, they decide to go further down the trail. And what would tickle me about this is they're walking down the trail, and Stephen Moyer's getting more and more kind of. He's obviously there's something wrong with him. He's like red-eyed, and he's like he's refusing to like drink water and stuff or eat anything. And he's clearly there's something going on with him. And every time his wife says, "You all right, Steve?" He's like, "Oh, just a bit peaky, just a bit peaky." So they're walking down the street, and they keep on turning to Stephen Moyer and saying, "Are we lost? Do you know where we are?" And he's like, "No, I know where I'm going." And yet, every time there's a mid to long range shot, you can see they're clearly walking on a well-worn path. So they're not lost in the woods, are they? They're on a path. So anyway, they come to this other clearing, and I do apologize for the depth I'm going in here. Right, they come to another clearing, and they see a dog that has been tied up to like a tree in a ravine and starved to death. And like rotted, and a couple of tents that have been torn to shreds, and there's no one to be seen, right? And they set up camp.
That's perfect. It's idyllic.
And they just set up camp, and then of course a storm comes and they can't move. But then his wife says to him, "I think we should. This probably isn't safe. We should move somewhere." And I thought, well, you probably should have said that late morning to mid afternoon, really, not now at the evening. And there's so many moments in this film that just beg a belief. Like bear in mind they've been walking all day to this sort of like this mysterious campsite that has been obviously just torn apart by whatever and left there, and no one's been there for weeks. And yet he bumps into like one of the guys from the party, and he says, "Oh, your daughter texted me and said she wanted to meet up effectively for a snog." And not once does he say, "Yeah, but if she sent you a text and she's lost in a massive forest, how did you know where to come, really?" He lets his daughter says, "I'm going to try and ring that guy to chat to him because you told him to go away," and he lets her in the middle of the night wander off into the woods on her phone in pitch blackness without a torch, and then panics when she goes missing. And this happens all the time, and it just goes on and on with these just stupid decisions. And by the end of it's not a question of like, is there something in the woods? It's just a question of you just think, well, this is all your fault. You're in this situation, possibly getting attacked by something, possibly Stephen Moyer's losing his mind, possibly that witch story was true, possibly there is some sort of huge monster in the woods. Either way, this is all your fault, I'm afraid. You've put yourself in this ridiculous situation. I have no sympathy for any of you. There's a bit towards the end when his two children make a break for it for like the highway to try and get the police. And they're running away from this. I won't spoil it in case people do want to watch it, because I do think people should watch it just to frown at it. They're running full pelt through the woods, like in an absolute panic, just trying to get to like some sort of society to say, "God, please help me and my family," and explain what's going on. And then it cuts, and she's just kneeling in front of her brother saying, "Oh, so who pushed you in the water? Like, because when we found you, you were in the water." And I thought, that's not really important now. What is important is getting to safety, I'm afraid. So it's just a ridiculous film, and the way it wraps up, and the way that there's supposed to be this sort of message at the end of the film. I was so just worn out by these awful, unrealistic choices throughout it that I had no sympathy for anyone. That said, I did enjoy it, because I must have said, "What?" every 5 or 6 minutes throughout that film to myself.
So it passed the what test?
It passed the 6 what test, which is now going to feature in every horror film review we do. Yeah, it is a good trashy horror, because it's like when they finished scenes and they were like packing it for the next shot. I could just imagine them all looking at the scripts and the actors like giving each other side eye and like frowning slightly, because like what, this isn't how people talk or interact with each other. Yeah, it's baffling and a wonderfully stupid film. So that's The Devil in the Woods, starring Stephen Moyer.
That sounds like it's on Prime.
It is very much.
Yeah, they really do. Prime. They really do scrape the bottom of the barrel on Prime. I love it. Okay, good. Well, let's move on to 2012 then. 2012, which was made in 2009, and it's 2020. Oh, it's just an absolute mind melt, isn't it? Anyway, so yes, this is about the Mayan prophecy about the end of the world in 2012, and it really happens. It's because of mutant neutrinos attacking the Earth's core or something. Anyways, this heats up the core of the Earth and triggers volcanoes and earthquakes everywhere. So the scientists and government know this is going to happen or is happening. So they build ships to basically deport rich and important people off the planet. And the rest of humanity will be left to die, basically. So John Cusack, naturally, who is a limo driver, he catches wind of this through a conspiracy theorist, mad conspiracy theorist in the woods called Woody, played by Woody Harrelson. And he takes from Woody this map to the nearest port where one of these ships is leaving from, in China, obviously, and then he sets about taking his family to hitch a ride and get to safety, basically. All the while, everything is kicking off. There's volcanoes, there's earthquakes, everything's getting destroyed around them. So this is after, obviously it's 2009, so this is after Independence Day, Godzilla, The Day After Tomorrow, and it was Roland Emmerich's last real crack of the whip for disaster movies. And it did pretty well, I think. I mean, he did have another pop at it with, what was it called? Resurgence? Independence Day Resurgence. But
is he still alive? Because the way you said that, it sounded like he died then.
No, I just think that I think it came quite a long time after those kind of, that disaster movie thing in the 90s. But it did okay. But I just think, I remember when Independence Day Resurgence came along, I just thought, wow, is there any appetite for this? I don't think so. And it clearly wasn't.
I've totally forgotten about that film.
Yes.
I'd never totally forgot about it.
I think I forgot about it as I was watching it, to be honest. By the way, everyone should watch the original teaser trailer for 2012, which is really cool. It uses the Wendy Carlos music from the Shining trailer. And it's very scary. And very serious little trailer. However, the actual film is not serious or scary, and it is totally ludicrous in a kind of fairground ride kind of way. There is a scene where John Cusack literally outruns a biblical scale pyroclastic blast from a super volcano on foot and jumps into an aircraft which is driving down a runway. It's ridiculous.
Is he wearing high-tech silver shadows to give him that extra boost that he needed?
I think he's wearing a suit because he's a limo driver.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
So probably brogues as well, yeah.
So dress shoes, no grip, outrun it, perfect.
Yeah, it's preposterous. Everything that John Cusack does in this film succeeds out of pure luck, by the way. Like, they're driving through LA as this huge earthquake's happening. And, like, if a building, like, falls in their way, he'll just drive through it and... It's like anyone else would just get instantly killed, but no, he drives through it and comes out the other side fine.
Is that in a fun way or a ridiculous way, or a mixture of both?
Bit of a mixture of both. Once you kind of get on board with the fact that it's not obeying any laws, then it's okay. It's fine. As I say, in a very fairground ride kind of way. There's nothing visceral about the way that humans interact with the destruction, you know? So anytime there are actual humans involved, it doesn't look good. I think when you see these enormous, extreme long shots of like tidal waves flowing over mountains, that does have a certain impressive grandeur. And I guess by then CG had come far enough that it can look basically realistic. It's definitely the grandest of his like disaster movies. And it's got it. The scale gives it that problematic issue of the fact that we're kind of relieved to see Cusack and his family surviving, and yet we're totally indifferent to the millions of tiny CGI people we see consumed by this destruction. And the film has this a really serious case of small world syndrome, and this is where characters, completely disparate characters over the other side of the world or whatever, will find themselves bumping into each other. Amidst the maelstrom of this global catastrophe, they'll bump into each other. Or there's a bit where the family crash land in the Himalayas, like one of the most vast mountain ranges, in the middle of the night, crash land in the Himalayas. And literally 2 minutes later, they're just found by a load of passing helicopters. That sort of thing really undermines that sense of scale, because it's like there's no sense of like a grandness in those kind of scenes. I think it does succeed just about because I think Roland Emmerich he's become like a bit of an expert at nailing the tone in these sorts of films. If you think about it this way, right? So you've got in Independence Day, you've got Jeff Goldblum. In Day After Tomorrow, you've got Jake Gyllenhaal, and in this, you've got John Cusack. And what they all have in common is a very kind of understated acting style. When they need to turn on, sort of thing. And
is that a nice juxtaposition against everything that's happening then?
Exactly. Yes, the way that it juxtaposes that against the global destruction is kind of dramatically interesting, even if John Cusack does get a bit swamped in it all. And I think also why it works is because Roland Emmerich has a good eye for like visual composition. I'm sure there are videos online about this, but I noticed virtually every time that he portrays this massive destruction, he will frame it in a very effective way. He often uses, he particularly uses kind of triangular shapes in the frame, and it works really well when you notice it. The film is way too long, by the way. It's nearly 3 hours, and it doesn't need to be, because there are some locations like Yellowstone. I mean, they go to Yellowstone and then go somewhere else, and then they end up coming back, and it's like, don't need to do this. Don't need the same characters to go by there again. But anyway, yes, it's too long. But if you're coming for mass destruction and sort of insanely over-the-top special effects, deployed with some level of skill, then you do get that. And it's a bit more fun with a bit more variety than The Day After Tomorrow. And it's obviously much less dated than Independence Day, which can look a little bit shoddy now. So, but yeah, it's very much in that wheelhouse, and that's fine.
This sounds like the kind of film that my mother would love, because she is someone who loves the experience of cinema and loves scope and huge things happening.
Oh yes,
I remember a favorite thing about the entire Expendables trilogy was Terry Crews firing a chain gun, because she said, "Oh my god, my seat was shaking. It was amazing. He was screaming. It was loud. It was amazing." So good old mum. She also told me, well, I remember I had a conversation with her a few days ago. Hello, mum, if you listen to this. She was saying, I was talking to her about Don the Dragon Wilson and Night Hunter, right? And how I said I actually couldn't watch some of it because it was giving me a headache and making me feel sick because the camera shake. Yeah. And she said, and I quote, "Oh, I know what you mean. I hate it in films when the camera doesn't stay still and it's swooping around. I've always hated that." And yet, she's a massive fan of Michael Bay films. She's a walking conundrum, my mother. Walking conundrum.
Yeah, I mean, that is his thing. Like unnecessary, illogical camera moves are his bag. So yeah,
I remember the sound she made when I was watching Bad Boys with her years ago when I was a teenager. That scene where Will Smith stands up in the first Bad Boys, that famous scene, and the camera's swooping around, and she was watching it, and she actually, the noise she made when like Will Smith stands up in his tight vest and the camera's swooping was, it was like a creepy Santa Claus opening his own presents, which were all dirty magazines of his own wife. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you put it that way, I know exactly what it's like.
It's nice to bring these childhood memories into the podcast.
Yeah. So 2012. It's okay.
Disaster films aren't really my bag because I
don't. I'm peak, obviously.
Honestly, yeah. And that's just about Joe Dante's parting. So. Yeah, and the next film I've got to talk about is Hide and Seek. Not that one, not the one with Robert De Niro and Dakota Fanning. This is Hide and Seek, which was also called Cord, starring Daryl Hannah and Jennifer Tilly, and Vincent Gallo as well is in it. Okay. So this is like I think I want to say mid-2000s film where Daryl Hannah is married to Bruce Greenwood. As we all are at some point, and they're having
in my mind, I am.
They're having trouble
working out how much work Daryl Hannah's had on her face.
Yeah, and working out how Bruce Greenwood is always cast as a slightly dodgy husband in a lot of mid-budget films.
To be typecast, yeah. Anyway, go on.
So the film is that Daryl Hannah and Bruce Greenwood are having trouble conceiving a child, so they go through IVF and stuff. And Daryl Hannah, it's not happening. They go to this clinic that Vincent Gallo works at, and it's not happening. She's getting morning sickness, and they're having test, and it's like, no, they're just kind of psychosomatic. I'm afraid that you're not pregnant. And then she gets into a sort of she gets assaulted and kidnapped from her own home and taken to Vincent Gallo's house, and his wife is Jennifer Tilly, and she is actually pregnant. He's forged all the results, and they're going to keep her there for 9 months until she gives birth, and then they're going to kill her and just basically take the baby away. And they fake her death. So Bruce Greenwood is good in it. He is a good actor. He's convinced his wife is still alive, even though the evidence is massively against it. And this features some astonishing bad policing as well.
Good.
And so he kind of, in the background, is trying to find out if she's still alive, if there's any glint of hope. And whereas the bulk of the film is obviously the kind of sort of schlocky thriller stuff of Jennifer Tilly and Vincent Gallo making Daryl Hannah like force feeding her and stuff while she's pregnant, and so they can keep her alive long enough to steal the baby. It's a weird film because I enjoyed it, but for very odd reasons. I really we'll talk about Bruce Greenwood first, right? His wife goes missing, and they find her car with obviously a corpse in it, burned to a crisp, and they say, that's your wife. It had all the jewelry on in your car. There's no sign of forced entry. I'm afraid your wife's dead. And he's just got this feeling. And he's really, the way he deals with it is actually quite set. He's like really bereft. And every now and again, it'll cut back to him, like sort of trying to move on slightly with his life in the background of the bulk of the film. And he's got one of his co-workers who's a complete screamer who's trying to seduce him, and there are some nice scenes where he's just it's hard to explain, but in his eyes he knows he should probably move on, but he's so in love with his wife and can't let go of the fact she's gone, that is actually handled really well. How he just kind of rebuffs her advances. It's actually quite a nicely dealt with. The rest of the film is bonkers. It is. Jennifer Tilly is I've only ever seen her in, I think, Bound in 1996, and as the voice of the Bride of Chucky. I don't think I've seen her in anything else. No. Of course, she's got that kind of cracked Barbie doll voice, and she's a really unique screen presence. And in this film, Vincent Gallo is all kind of creepy, big NHS glasses, trying to sort of tell everyone it's all right, but like it's really kind of sinister when he's alone with Daryl Hannah in this basement they keep her in. And Jennifer Tilly has got some sort of, I don't know what it is, they don't really go into detail, but she's very childlike, like very excitable and childlike and reactive to things, and she's talking in this ridiculous voice, and she's just acting like tying dolls around her stomach as if she's pregnant, but doing it in a way that's creepy, but sort of, it's weird how she plays such a zany character, but manages to ground it, because she clearly threw herself into the role and said, right, I'm bonkers, I'm going full tilt. And she's really unpredictable and quite frightening. And there's a scene where Daryl Hannah refuses to eat. And of course, Vincent Gallo is a doctor, so he gets this kind of really weird, like turn of the century kind of force feeding pump that they used to force feed ducks on a farm to make foie gras. And he's the kind of reticent to use it because he wants her to be healthy. But then, and so does Jennifer Tilly, but she's so like, oh, I want to use the pump. And it's really creepy how she's like laughing maniacally and force feeding her this weird gloop. And it's like, this is really unpleasant. But it sticks to its guns. It's a silly film, but I will give it that it sticks to its guns until the end. The only problem I had with it is that there's one point where Daryl Hannah escapes. This isn't a spoiler, by the way. She escapes, and she walks for miles. And the way it's edited, it's like she's just trudged, because it's in winter, because she's obviously pregnant for so long, in like a jacket, just walking through this like knee-deep snow. And she's totally like, just fatigued and hungry. And she finds a phone box and calls Bruce Greenwood, and he turns up after the fact, kind of thing. And he's at this phone box, and he looks up, and the farmhouse is about 100 yards away. And I thought, what? What? So that was a bit right. That's handy. That's a handy plot point, isn't it?
Yes.
So yeah, it was fun. It was fun and ridiculous. I wouldn't recommend watching if you're pregnant, though. I'm not going to watch Inside instead.
Yeah, but I might wait a couple of weeks for that one then. Yeah, might be an idea. So what's it called and where is it available?
It's called Hide and Seek, not that one with Robert De Niro and Dakota Fanning. This was clearly, it's on Prime. By the description it's on Prime. And I think it's also called Cord in some territories, so as in umbilical cord, which makes more sense, really.
Oh, right. Well, okay. That kind of leads nicely onto my next one, which
Is
also
Rosemary?
has multiple titles. Tomboy is also known as The Assignment. This one's on Netflix.
I think I know where they were going with that title.
Yeah. This is so Michelle Rodriguez plays someone called Frank Kitchen, who's a hitman, and he is a man at the start, albeit an unconvincing one, who is put through forced gender reassignment, and understandably she is perturbed when she wakes up as a woman. Sigourney Weaver plays the doctor who does the work, and she does it out of revenge for someone that Frank, or now called Frankie, killed. Yeah, so it's kind of a revenge thing like that. And of course, Michelle Rodriguez's character, Frank, is working her way towards getting to Sigourney Weaver, basically. So, okay, it's directed by Walter Hill. It's quite a recent one. I think it was 2011 or something. So it's a recent Walter Hill film. And to be honest, though, it could be anyone. There's no real evidence of Walter's previous craft. Sigourney Weaver's performance is probably the main issue in this, but there are many issues. But Sigourney Weaver, she looks like she's being fed the lines through an earpiece. Like, it's such a vacant, weird performance. And in its pure exposition, endless exposition and explaining her own motives. And I'd like to point out that Shakespeare quotes do not a good script make. And yet she keeps doing it. Very tedious. And just really, there's way too much screen time devoted to her character, Sigourney Weaver's character. I mean, we end up knowing everything about her history and education, but it's to no end. I don't know what the purpose of it is. We're not given a compelling reason to care to that extent about her, and yet Michelle Rodriguez's character is a complete mystery, really. I'll get onto the stuff about what Michelle Rodriguez looks like in this film, but anyway, it is. I'll say that it is bafflingly edited. Like, there's a scene where someone played by Tony Shalhoub, obviously, complains. He complains to Sigourney Weaver about being lectured. No, he complains to someone else, right, that Sigourney Weaver's character has lectured him about Edgar Allan Poe. So he's talking to his colleague or whatever, complaining about this, and so it goes on about that for a while, and then it cuts like to obviously the scene they're describing, and you got Sigourney Weaver's now acting out the scene that he's just described. It's like, you don't need to show us and tell us. You just have the scene of her talking about Edgar Allan Poe. You don't need to have him introduce it, you know? It's just pointless. It's weird. And then it keeps saying things like 8 months before and stuff, which only kind of muddles the chronology.
It's not there to pad up the running time. It's not a short film, is it?
It's not a long film, so it may well be there to do for that purpose. Yeah, so and it's got these bad writing kind of tropes in it. Like, for example, Michelle Rodriguez is keeping like a vlog of her experiences. So, I mean, bear in mind that she is meant to be this ultra like masculine, unemotional hitman, and she is just making this vlog to explain, just for our benefit, basically, in lieu of good writing. She's just explaining her motivations, what she's doing now. It means that we get this unrelenting voiceover. Yeah, and people keep being like how shocked at how different Frank looks. And it's like, oh my God, you've had plastic surgery, one of them says. And it's like, no, she clearly hasn't had plastic surgery. At most, she's had a shave. That's it. Because she literally looks identical minus the beard. Like, when you first see, because at the start, right, you first see Frank as a man. And I assumed that this was someone who'd gone through the gender reassignment. I thought it was going to be female to male, because she doesn't look like a man. Like, they even have like quite a gratuitous like nude scene where she's got this strangely shaped chest and really thin waist. She looks like Prince or something. And and like, and a penis and stuff, and like all this really hairy chest, like Sean Connery in the old Bond films or whatever. Really ridiculous stuck-on beard, and yet this really kind of luxuriant, like female hair. It's so odd, and yeah, it's bizarre. But then no, that's meant to be her. That's meant to be Frank's normal look. It's only that then he gets changed into a woman later on. Anyway, yeah. So it's very silly. It's really the Sigourney Weaver subplot is the thing which really knocks the wind out of the movie every time, because it's so much time spent on her when it could really have just been following Michelle Rodriguez around, kicking ass and shooting people, like, you know, getting to her way to the top, and perhaps negotiating her relationship with her girlfriend. You know, you could have had just that as a film. You didn't really need Sigourney Weaver chiming in every time. So it's got music by Giorgio Moroder.
Oh.
Which, it's sometimes really nice. It's not very synthy. It's much more modern electronic. And it's sometimes really, really gorgeous sounding. But other times it's got that annoying thing that they did a lot in the 2000s, where it was like, it would be really glitchy and like almost like breakbeat type thing and over action scenes. And it's just a bit cringeworthy now. It's a film. It should really... It sounds like it should offend a lot of people, but it almost goes out of its way not to offend anyone. Like Sigourney Weaver even gives this kind of disclaimer about her lack of enmity towards transgender people, and there's a scene between Frank and her doctor, which is played completely straight, but which is fine. But at the same time, it's set against this comic book tone it has elsewhere. So he even has like comic book frames, just like in The Warriors. Like between scenes, they'll have like a comic book frame, like it's like this kind of mad, off the wall exploitation film, and yet it's weirdly sensitive about the subject of transsexuality. So it's too careful and kind of tasteful to be an exploitation movie. I kind of feel like it needed to be more offensive to be interesting, but it's not. It's just a pretty bad action movie with some really stodgy scenes in between.
This is really weird
involving Sigourney Weaver,
because I'm pretty sure that, I don't know if it was before or after this, but Walter Hill directed Bullet in the Head with Sylvester Stallone, and that was offensive in its kind of racial politics. Right. Yeah. So he can be offensive if he wants. If he pulls his bloody finger out,
to turn it on.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to watch that film.
It's not worth it. I mean, if it was amusingly offensive, then maybe it would be. But yeah, if anyone does want to watch it, it's called Tomboy, or possibly called The Assignment. It's on Netflix anyway.
The next film I've got is Under Suspicion with Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, and yes, Thomas Jane and Monica Bellucci. Is this one you're familiar with? It's a 2000.
It is not, but I can imagine what drew you towards it. And his name rhymes with Bomber Kane.
Yes, that's right. It is Monica Bellucci. No, it was. Well, in all fairness, again, I keep on saying this, but I do like kind of mystery thriller things. And I saw Gene Hackman and Morgan Freeman. I thought, this is going to be like a really woody legal drama or something. And then the running time was 90 minutes, and I thought, okay. So the story is, this is one that I remember when I worked in the video store that I watched then. And as I was watching it now, I thought, actually, I have seen this, but I had no idea what the ending was going to be in it. And I thought, this is actually pretty cool. I like it when this happens. And like every time I watch Detox, I just forget everything, possibly because it's extremely forgettable. Who's to say? So the story is that Gene Hackman is an extremely wealthy tax attorney, and he lives in... I've actually forgotten where his base. It's somewhere in South America. They live in this like really beautiful sort of paradise, and there's a huge celebration, like a Mardi Gras celebration going on, and Morgan Freeman is the local sort of captain of the local police force, and they've obviously got a relationship that's a kind of friendly relationship. They know a lot about each other's personal lives. Well, they think they do, and Morgan Freeman says there's been a spate of murders. Like 2 girls have been found raped and strangled, like 12 or 13-year-old girls. We just need you to come in for 10 minutes before you go to give a speech at this charity event across the way. Just to answer some questions in the statement you gave, because Gene Hackman, we find, discovered one of the bodies, and the film it sort of unveils from there. It's a film very much about Morgan Freeman saying, right, can you just run through what happened between this time and this time? Gene Hackman will explain it, and then Morgan Freeman will catch him out in a small aspect of it, and then the whole thing kind of snowballs. They are good actors. Gene Hackman is a good actor, and the film, the fact that it's effectively, apart from a few flashbacks, which I'll go into in a minute, is set in this single large room in a police station in Morgan Freeman's office, is really cool. The fact that they're obviously, like, the fact that it's 90 minutes really helps. The fact that it's so taut and it's always moving forward. It's not like an ambling film. Thomas Jane is really funny in this film because he plays like, whereas Morgan Freeman is very kind of calm and collected and is doing his job properly. Good policing in a film on this podcast. It's always nice to see. Trying to catch him out and get that sort of hard, definitive proof they need if he is guilty. Thomas Jane is just completely believes he's guilty from the second he sets foot in the room, and is just determined to just catch him out, like, and just constantly saying stuff to trip him up. And Morgan Freeman spends the whole film just saying, "Shut up, shut up." There's a really funny sequence where Morgan Freeman has to leave for 10 minutes, and Thomas Jane has just lost his temper with Gene Hackman and almost blown the whole thing. And Morgan Freeman says, right, I've got to go away for 10 minutes to speak to the chief. Sit with Gene Hackman, sit in the room, and don't speak to him. Just sit there, don't engage, just make sure he doesn't leave the room. And Thomas Jane's like, yeah, you're right, Captain, I'm being a silly Billy. So he goes back in and sits in his chair, and Gene Hackman's just smoking one of his many fags. And Thomas Jane just starts giggling to himself, just going, and Gene Hackman's like, what's so funny? And he just says, I'm just thinking about when you strangled and murdered those girls, aren't I? It's like, that is not what Morgan Freeman asked you to do. So that's quite funny. Monica Bellucci's really good in it as sort of a sizzling, like sort of a moody siren. You're not sure where her loyalties lie. And it's just a really good, taut thriller that's quite verbose, which is nice, because a lot of it comes through in how much Gene Hackman sweats, quite frankly. The only thing that I had that just really dated it from like the late 90s, early 2000s, and I thought, this is just, it just seems really cheap, is every time Gene Hackman is, and I can see why they did it. Maybe they thought that in the editing it would come across as a bit boring, that it's all the action is in this room. But I would have preferred it if it was, because then it would make things even more murky, because you're just going off people's speech, what they're choosing to say. Right. But every time Gene Hackman or Morgan Freeman talk about something, it'll cut back to the scene they're talking about, and they're both there talking about it.
Oh, really?
As if and it's awful. It's an awful thing to do, because they're walking around this girl on the floor and saying, "Oh, is this how you found her? Yeah, she was lying just like this." And you're like, "No, don't do that. This makes it seem like the bloody virtual reality thing." Oh, so God. It doesn't happen too often, but enough to make me wish that it wasn't in the film. But it's good. It's nice to see. I mean, Gene Hackman retired not long after this from acting, so it's nice to see his kind of, I guess, his last, because after this he was in like Heartbreakers and the Royal Tenenbaums and stuff. Yeah. It's nice to see him in a quite a dark, wordy, very actor-driven thriller.
Yeah, he kept the quality until the end, to be fair. Of his career.
Even in Heartbreakers he was amazing with Sigourney Weaver again and Jennifer Love Hewitt.
So it's worth a watch. Under Suspicion.
Yeah, like I said, 90 minutes. If you like a thriller, it's good. It's a really good film to sit through.
Is this one on Prime?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay, I may well check this out then. I will talk about Sightseers now. This is
Ben Wheatley, isn't it?
It is Ben Wheatley. I watched this on Blu-ray. I don't think it's on any streaming services. Naturally, I got the German Blu-ray because it's got a nice crochet effect on the Blu-ray cover.
Why do you constantly buy German Blu-rays?
Well, sometimes you have to. I'm looking at you in the mouth of madness. But yeah, there was. I'll talk first about. There's a 70s film by Mike Leigh called Nuts in May, right? Which followed this fusspot English couple with this kind of creepy parent-child dynamic as they go on their camping holiday in England. And it's basically they clash with other holiday makers, and reprimand their behavior, but they've basically got no kind of social skills or empathy of their own. And it was very funny and well observed. And Sightseers basically takes that same idea and that style, but adds an ultra violent element because this couple end up murdering the people who annoy them. They're played by Steve Oram and Alice Lowe, who are both comedians, I think. And he basically, they're a couple. He basically whisks her away from her horribly overbearing mother, who's obviously developed this childlike dependency on her, in her. And they go on this caravan holiday to places like the National Tramway Museum and the Derwent Pencil Museum and places like that.
He's really doing sweeping her away off her feet.
Yeah. So they have this argument with this guy who's littering, but think nothing of it. But then they accidentally reverse the car and kill him, and it's quite a violent death. But it is an accident. But he gets a real taste for this, and he feels quite good about it. The fact that he's killed this person. And he basically then, from then on, he uses his kind of middle-class liberal ideology as a rationale for killing anyone who doesn't agree with him, his like political views and stuff. And she's very submissive, being the kind of child in this parent-child relationship. And she gradually comes on board as well. It's about as black a comedy as you'll ever see, because there are no jokes. The humor is just in its observance of everyday British crapness and the constant drizzle and the underlying resentments hidden behind the kind of small talk in their encounters with people. And that
behind
in itself,
the small talk, by the way, a great old Samuel song. Thanks for bringing that up.
Brilliant. Yeah, slipped it in there. I'm not sure that would be enough to sustain a whole film. But what keeps it interesting is the shifting power dynamic between the two lead actors, because she's so subordinated and just goes along with whatever he does. And yet it gradually dawns on her that he is actually just a bit of a macho tyrant in all his relationships, including theirs. And it's a question of whether she wants to allow him to continue kind of wielding that power and just go along with him. As you say, Ben Wheatley directed it. This was in 2012. It was just after Kill List, literally the following year, I think. It's no less depressing than Kill List, but it is funnier. And I just find its constant overcast skies and boring campsites just hilarious anyway. Not sure what people from other countries would think of it, but as a British person, it is funny just looking at the kind of places they go. It never really kind of mocks the places themselves, which is good. It doesn't like say, oh, look at this funny pencil museum. They're kind of just background for it. The butt of the joke is always them and their relationship. And the dialogue's really good, really sharp, very real. And the juxtaposition with the extreme violence is very jarring, but that is funny in itself. And it's really just a unique film. It's a unique alternative horror film that everyone should see who's interested in horror, really. So, very good.
Yeah, I'll write that down on my list. A couple of things. One is that Steve Oram has rocked up in a couple of films I've seen recently, in the last year or two. With I actually reviewed it on this podcast. I can't remember what it was about a woman who believes she can bring her like dead son back, and he plays sort of someone who he has the power to do it through these like weird occult rituals, and he's a really dark character in that. Jesus. And also he rocks up in Fabric.
Right. Okay.
As in some of the really funny scenes, along with, I didn't watch it, but the dude from the Mighty Boosh that's not Noel Coward or whatever his name is.
Noel Coward, Noel Fielding. Yeah. I'm not sure who the other one was.
But yeah, there's some scenes in Fabric that are really funny with Steve Oram and the dude from the Mighty Boosh in it. And the other thing is that Mark Kermode has just done an interview with Ben Wheatley, and it's really funny. He's a really down to earth guy, and he doesn't mind swearing. He does not mind swearing.
I think he's got a really interesting filmography, and this is so different in tone to Kill List or something, but just as good, I think.
So this leads me relatively nicely onto a film called Deadfall, which stars Olivia Wilde and Eric Bana and Chris Christopherson and Sissy Spacek and the guy Ben Hannum. What did you say his name was?
Charlie Hunnam.
Charlie Hunnam.
Yeah.
So, Deadfall is once again, Rupert. I'm completely out of my wheelhouse here. It's a 2012 dark thriller.
All right.
So, okay.
Okay.
So it starts off with someone who basically is killed in the initial car crash. It has nothing to do with the film. It's a heist that's gone sort of right, I suppose. You've got Olivia Wilde, who's got bags of money, and Eric Bana putting on an American accent, which is fine. It's better than his British one. And they're a brother and sister with a really dysfunctional relationship who have just done this huge heist, and they're trying to get to Canada. So they're somewhere right up north, and it's freezing. It is Mork and Mindy, and it is banging down with snow. And they sort of career off the road. The driver crashes, and they realize that they're after Eric Bana. But so they come up with this idea to just split up and just reconvene in Canada.
Right.
So they kind of split the money between them and go their separate ways. Eric Bana is wearing a full suit with a jacket. Olivia Wilde is wearing a cocktail dress with sequins on it. So she is cold. And so what happens is it cuts then to Charlie Hunnam, who is a boxer who's been in prison for having a fight fixed for a few years. And he comes out and he just wants to kind of get his life back on track. He calls his mother, Sissy Spacek, to say he's going to come and visit. And the first thing he does, unfortunately, is go to his old boxing promoter, punch him once in the face, and the guy just trips, slams the back of his head on a filing cabinet, and is dead before he hits the floor. So instantly he's like, oh, that's not going to look good. That is not going to look good. That I came from prison here and killed someone. They're going to think I did that on purpose. So before he even has a chance to kind of react to the situation, he happens across Olivia Wilde while he's driving home, and it looks like she's seducing him, but what actually ends up happening is she, through talking to him and actually having like a real connection with someone who isn't just using her for sex, she realizes how abusive Eric Bana has been towards her in the relationship and how creepy their relationship is. So while that half of the film is happening and she's kind of finding her own personality and coming into herself and realizing, oh, actually, I really do like this person, the other side of the film is Eric Bana basically murdering his way up north. And there are some really nice sequences in it. He happens across a family with a really abusive stepfather in a cabin, which leads to some nice moments. And it all culminates in them meeting up at this house, at Charlie Hunnam's parents' house, Chris Christopherson and Sissy Spacek, where Eric Bana is, and Olivia, I was going to say Newton-John then, Olivia Wilde. And they've both had such different journeys, how they sort of coalesce and how they react to finally being together again. Right. And it's decent. It's good. There's a buzzing scene where someone in the film at one point gets a knife shoved through his hand, and to get the knife out, he doesn't pull the knife out. He yanks his hand back towards himself, so it really tears through the rest of his hand. And I thought, and nothing is made of it, but I thought that would hurt. That would hurt. And I sent him a text and said that must have hurt.
He didn't text back though because he couldn't use his hand.
And he had no context for anything I was saying. In film 8 years ago. So yeah, it's again, it's a decent 90 minutes it's I think sometimes when it goes into the relationship and some of the things that happen, because they are biological brother and sister, Eric Bana and Olivia Wilde. It leads the film, sort of lends the film like a quite sinister edge that you think, did that need to be there? Is that would it have been a bit more accessible? Would it have been any worse for wear without that in it? But it's in there and it doesn't detract too much from it. It's just as I usually say, it's just a decent thriller.
Been quite lucky with these little thrillers, haven't you? These little 90 minutes.
Well, the thing is, there was a moment after I watched Closed Circuit where Eric Bana was on the verge of becoming a Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, and I thought, but then I watched this and it kind of gave me because he's quite he's quite a, considering the stuff he's doing, he's quite an interesting character because he's kind of he's just quite dynamic.
Okay, so that was called
Deadfall, and that's from I think 2012, and that was on Netflix.
Right. The Prestige is on Prime. This is one that Christopher Nolan made in 2006, straight after Batman Begins. It's a story of two magicians in the 19th century, played by Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman. When something goes horribly wrong during a performance, and Hugh Jackman's wife dies in the trick, and they obviously separate.
It's only 3-card Monty as well, isn't it? It's quite surprising how these things can spiral out of control.
Yeah, it really did escalate. They become bitter rivals, and they try and jeopardize each other's tricks and stuff because they separate and have different careers, but they're trying to jeopardize each other. And meanwhile, they're trying to create their masterpiece of a trick, trying to one up each other. When one of them achieves this trick, the other becomes obsessed with understanding it and replicating it. I won't mention what the trick is because it kind of may be a spoiler in itself. But anyway, it is a beautifully shot film, and it's got really nice production design. Like it feels very lived in without being fetishized. It's just like it's a believable place that they inhabit here. So that's cool. David Bowie obviously rocks up as Nikola Tesla with a slightly dodgy accent. Although I don't know what accent Tesla would have had. I think he was Serbian, so it may be accurate. Anyway, Scarlett Johansson's in there as well as one of her girlfriends, and she does this kind of decent British accent. There are a few mundane things that bother me about the film. There aren't very many tricks. You don't really see many tricks happen, which bothers me a little bit. Because I like how it shows the mechanics of certain tricks, but I kind of wanted to see more of a staged performance in some scenes. I think this has something to do with Christopher Nolan's style, though, because it's relentlessly dark, literally, and he is, as always, utterly committed to the narrative puzzle itself. There's no real room for color or texture outside the boundaries of that, where I think it could have done with it here. Christian Bale has got this annoying "oi governor" type accent, which is a bit much. Found that quite aggravating. But more importantly, I'd say that the final kind of takeaway from the film, the final message, if you like, is a bit of a slippery and debatable one. It's really saying, without giving anything away, that no one wants to understand the trick itself. They just want to be amazed by it, and it's a bit esoteric. And I think that is at the core of why so many critics kind of took issue with the ending in the end, because Roger Ebert called it a cheat, the ending, essentially because it introduces something which exists outside of the rules laid down up to that point. I mean, it's not quite I found a shotgun moment, but it does come close. I don't have a problem with a supernatural element per se, but I'm not sure that the final message, which I mentioned, I'm not sure that is profound or succinct enough to kind of justify the hokiness of the kind of twist ending, because it's presented like this enormous like emotional catharsis at the end, but I'm not sure really Nolan at that point had that emotional element to him, to be honest. He was still building puzzles more than anything. It wasn't really until Interstellar that we peeked into Nolan's heart, if you like. But anyway, any film, right, which features a main character, bear in mind, who's always around, but they never speak, and they're clearly wearing fake facial hair, it will be found out long before the end. And if your big emotional conclusion rests on that mystery character, then as an audience, you're prepared for it so far in advance that the ending is inevitably going to fall flat, and it does, to be honest. But up to that point, it is an intelligent and well-made, slightly laborious period drama, and it does have the occasional unconvincing domestic scene in it, especially involving Christian Bale. So I wouldn't say it's essential Christopher Nolan, but it's decent enough. It's okay.
That whole thing you said then about like people just want to be amazed by a trick and not understand it, I think it's kind of fundamentally flawed, because we both have a mutual friend who was a close-up magician, and like when he would show me tricks, like mainly card tricks or close-up magic, it's like, how'd you do that? But then when they show you, when the magician reveals it to you, how they're done, it's like a further level of amazement, because then you actually realize the intricacy that goes into it and this level of skill and time. So it's almost like that. And then they do it again when you know what they're doing. And then you kind of think, oh, well, that is, now that I know what you're doing and I still can't quite see it, that's really clever. That's a real talent.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, it's like looking at the world in a, you look at the world and the beauty of nature, say, and yes, it's impressive in its own right, but it only becomes more impressive when you understand why it is like it is, when you understand the scientific underpinning of it, it doesn't become less interesting. So yeah, I don't really buy it either, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's The Prestige, and that's on Prime.
And that's film of the week. So a decent film. I've got 2 left. How are you going?
I've just got the one.
Nice. Oh, this is perfect then. I'm doing this slightly out of order because while we were doing this podcast, I wrote down one that I've forgotten, so I'll do the one I was going to end on now, which is The Witch in the Window. This is on Shudder. Yes, a 7-day free trial. Stop going on about it. So I'm trying to squeeze in as many as I can before they invariably just get wiped from my memory in my hard drive. So The Witch in the Window, it stars someone who looks suspiciously like a cross between Billy Crystal and someone else that escapes me now that faced it. Oh, he looks like so-and-so, but there was a touch of Billy Crystal in him. To
Ted
the point,
Danson?
there's a scene, if only it was Ted Danson.
Guess who the other person is.
But let's just say Billy Crystal. So it stars someone who looks like Billy Crystal, who's a father in a family. He's got a young son who has done something unspoken. On his computer, he has done or seen something unspoken that has like shaken the family, and the mother is it's sort of hinted at. It's not directly said, but she's a very difficult woman that the father loves. The father just wants this family unit, but his wife is kind of making it difficult, and the son's obviously kind of stuck between them. So the film is mainly about the father takes the son away for a few weeks because he says he's flipping a house. So it's kind of usual thing out in, away from New York, upstate New York or whatever, and it's a kind of a rural farmhouse, which is something that the mother has always wanted, and he's hoping it's a way to kind of bring the family together, get away from the stress of the city and the politics and the social problems, and just have this kind of close-knit family life. And the film is basically them doing it up, and they find out from someone working on the house about the previous owner, and what happened to that person who lived there, and obviously it starts to get a little bit supernatural. The film I saw, Faye chose this film. She said, "I watched The Witch in the Window." I glanced online because I don't like to read into films too much, and it got pretty good reviews, like user reviews, like this is actually a really interesting film. I put it on, and it was 70 minutes long, and I thought, oh god, come on! I've seen Granny. I know how these short films go, but it's actually turns out to be one of the best horror films I've seen this year because.
Wow.
It was really, I wouldn't say nice, but again, this is hard without giving anything away, but there's a real, the father and son, first out, there are some really creepy scenes in it, and it does that thing that I know you like, and I know terrifies Faye, is when they'll just be having a normal, like, familial conversation sort of thing, and then you'll just notice in the background, unspoken of, is just a shape or a person just standing relatively in plain sight, really. So you're like, oh, that is creepy. That is creepy. There's a couple of jump scares, but it's not really about that. Weirdly, the film is about this. The emotional core is how much the father character is willing to push forward to try and keep his family together.
Yeah,
and he's really good in it. It's a really kind of surprisingly understated performance in these kind of low budget horror films that usually just, as I usually say at the end of it, it just explodes up instead of getting explored. And this is definitely a case where it just gets explored. And it has a denouement where it ends. And I was like, oh, that's obviously the natural ending. And then there's another like 5 minutes. And I thought when it kind of the screen faded back into this other scene, I thought, what? Oh, don't do this. You were doing really well. But and the last few minutes completely make it. And I thought that was really good. I'm really glad those 5 minutes exist. So The Witch in the Window is, it's not like a really horrific, gory film. It's more of a family drama than anything else, but I felt like it really paid off well. And it's 75 minutes of your time, you know? So if you're a fan of horrors, I wouldn't even say slow burning because it's too brief to be slow burning. It just gets everything done. So yeah,
I'm all over this. Really, this is happening.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Really understated film.
Yeah. The Witch in the Window. Yes, good. And that's on Shudder. I think I've already used my free trial, unfortunately.
Well, my password is...
Your password is The Last Samurai. See what I did there?
That was bloody clever, that was.
Which is... Okay, so The Last Samurai is on Prime. And it is set in 1870-something. Tom Cruise plays a guy an ex-soldier who's boozing hard to overcome the PTSD he experienced after massacring Native Americans, basically. Wow. The army generals have made a deal with the new Japanese emperor, and Nathan, the Tom Cruise's character, his job is to train the Japanese army to suppress a samurai rebellion in the country. Needless to say, it does not go well, and he is captured by the samurai, and he stays in their village. Because he's a skilled warrior in this warrior culture, they treat him with a fair amount of kindness and actually train him in the way of the samurai. And he's released from captivity eventually, returns to the US Army, and then finds out they're planning to annihilate the samurai for good, using enormous machine guns. But the question is, where does his honor lie, at that point? So at its core, it's kind of got the classic kind of samurai themes, and I suppose later anime type themes of the machine of industry sort of encroaching on ancient rural culture.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Because I'm just thinking, right? I've never seen this film at all. I know of it.
Yep.
But you just described the setup, and I'm thinking about the title of the film. And is that some sort of giveaway?
Maybe.
Oh dear.
It is. Okay. It's easy to transplant the kind of noble savage themes that we've seen in progressive westerns throughout the years into this kind of samurai culture. It does lean pretty hard into the white savior trope, and this is the idea that another culture can only be saved by the intervention of a more skillful, braver, or more resourceful white person, basically. Although I have my problems with the criticism of this particular trope anyway, because like Dances with Wolves, say, which is basically is Dances with Wolves, or something like Amistad, say, or anything like that. These are mainstream films, right, designed to give their audience, who are invariably not from the community in question, the white savior trope. It gives you a way into that culture, into a culture basically that audiences might otherwise know nothing about. So, and I think that the kind of fish out of water thing can help illuminate a lot of the cultural differences and incompatibilities, but also, crucially, the compatibilities between cultures, what's universal. So it helps the themes become universal, and I think
it's not just a sort of washing negative then.
No, it's not just saying they're useless, they can't deal with themselves, so therefore they need a white man to come and save them. It's not as simple as that. And I think that there is a net good to it. So anyway, but regardless, I'm sure there'll be lots of woke people who'd be opposed to this. But anyway, so possibly more problematic and maybe a little bit more disingenuous is the portrayal of samurais themselves, because it is so picture postcard and idealized. I literally want to live in the village. Like, it's so picturesque and peaceful. It never really considers the idea that samurai might have had a slightly less noble agenda than altruism and the rural life. That actually they may have had a bit of a privileged status in themselves, so didn't want to lose that. Who knows? And the kind of brutal reality of women is, you see it is photographed in the film, but it's never really explored. And the one Japanese woman with a speaking role isn't actually given any kind of voice to protest or anything. But there you go. Cruise is good.
We're Cruise fans here, aren't we? He's in safe hands here.
I'd say that his normal charisma is slightly locked behind him, either being quite stolid or a miserable drunk. But he's still very, he does command attention, and there's pretty strong support from Timothy Spall, who's got quite a cool role in it. Ken Watanabe, who's pretty much in everything which involves a Japanese person, and of course Tony Goldwyn, naturally.
Hey, here he is.
Yeah, he plays a pantomime villain, basically. I've said it before. This is Edward Zwick, who made stuff like Glory and Blood Diamond, Legends of the Fall stuff. He is really good at making a decent chunk of money go a long way, and everything does look really gorgeous in this. And the battle scenes are very impressive, especially the final fight, which I liked. It's it had a lot of detailed shifting formations and stuff, like as in battle formations, and it reminded me of Stanley Kubrick's
Centurion
work
on the Amiga?
Well, I was going to say Spartacus, but yes, Centurion would also be true. I think it's a good film, even if it's just a set of pretty familiar tropes, just in a new location, really. The script is pretty smart, and Hans Zimmer's music is typically stirring. So yeah, it's pretty solid, really.
How long is this film, sorry?
I'd say over 2 hours.
Okay.
Maybe between 2 and 2.5.
But it's not bloated.
No, it's not. No. Yeah, and it's never boring.
This seems to be a film of Tom Cruise's that doesn't really get spoken about much. I've never really had a conversation about it before.
No, I don't know. I mean, I think it did pretty well. It wasn't a flop or anything. It did pretty decent, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it is so familiar. It's. I think it got quite dismissed by a lot of critics, just being another Dances with Wolves or something like that. But I don't know.
Was that early 2000, like 2001 or something?
2003, I think it was. Okay. But yeah, and I don't know. Maybe it's the white savior thing that people have a problem with, but I don't have a problem with it. And I think it's a pretty picturesque
valid device.
Yes, but I think it's a pretty beautiful film, and it got me interested in Japanese culture, certainly. So I think this net good, really. Yep.
So how long was it? So you watched the film, and then how quickly did you buy Ghost of Tsushima on PS4?
I did actually think of that. I thought, I really want to play Ghost of Tsushima now. Yeah. But then I thought, am I really going to enjoy that? Probably not.
I'll write down The Last Samurai. I will watch it because I'm a Tom Cruise fan. But
it's very watchable. It's very palatable.
Okay. So the last film to end the podcast, then before we choose the films of the week, is Ty Sheridan in The Night Clerk or Clerk. Night Clerk.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this? Because I know you like Ty Sheridan.
Yeah, I'm a fan of him, but I have not seen this.
This is a film, I think it's only a couple of years ago. So Ty Sheridan, I first came across him in Mud with Matthew McConaughey, a man whom I also fancy. And I really liked, although I mix him up in my mind with Barry Keoghan sometimes,
he does have that, yeah, I know what you mean.
I really like Ty Sheridan's screenplay. Yeah, because I know he was in that, and then the next thing I heard about him, he was playing like an early version of Cyclops in one of the X-Men films. Didn't care about that. No. So when
Ready Player One, probably weren't interested in that. Yeah.
Nope, didn't see that. Not for any reason, just like, I think it's the hype. I just get put off by hype, so I just think, the budget's more than I've got in my pocket. I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, you need to wait at least 15 years until the hype's died down.
Yeah, and to then come on this podcast and say, yeah, it's all right. Decade and a half wasted. Or as my father called it, his second marriage. So The Night Clerk is a film about Ty Sheridan. I got wind of this film just by scrolling through Netflix, and I saw him in it, and it was an intriguing sort of thumbnail, just him sitting on a desk, and it basically says that, a troubled young man sort of thing witnesses a murder and gets embroiled into it. Well, I thought, well, it sounds to me like it could be a pretty disposable thriller. So
sounds like it might be a 90-minute dark thriller.
Click. So I popped it on, and I really like this film. I'm not sure if I like the film or I just really, really like Ty Sheridan in it, because he plays a character who is a hotel clerk, but he's got Asperger's.
Right.
He's an Aspie, as he calls himself, and it's not. Again, I always feel a bit uncomfortable when I talk about these films, because things like this I have no real experience of. It's not something I've never knowingly met someone with Asperger's. I don't know what the symptoms are, although they're kind of explained in the film. I don't know if they're explained in the film in the kind of film logic. I don't know how accurate it is. But I'm always a bit wary in that I think, is this just really disrespectful to people who have this this problem? So, but Ty Sheridan's performance is magnetic in this film. He does not stay still for a second, and he's so socially awkward that your heart completely bleeds for him. And he's got this job where he works in this hotel and just is just there in the night shift effectively all the time, so nothing really happens. And his way of interacting with people is he's got loads of cameras set up. Because he's so social awkward when he's with people, he's got all these cameras set up, and he just kind of mimics what they do. So, like, after his shift, he'll go home. His mum is played by Helen Hunt. I'll chat about her in a bit. But he goes into his sort of basement apartment that his mum has set up in the lower floor of a house, and he watches all the footage on the cameras, not for any real creepy reason, but just because he finds that when he repeats what they say, and when he's by himself and there's no sort of social situation, he can kind of relax and just there's no tension for him at that time. Right. So you kind of thinking, filming people bad, but the reason he's doing it are pretty benign, you know. So he witnesses a murder, and the police find like one of his cameras, and he gets embroiled in it. The investigating officer is played by John Leguizamo. And he is brash. He is brash and does not deal with someone with learning difficulties with any sense of grace, kind sir. So, of course, he just goes wailing into him saying, "Oh, you did it, did you?" And of course, Ty Sheridan's like really struggling to kind of explain himself and his reasons and stuff. And the waters are muddied further by Ana de Armas, I think her name is, or Armes, who was one of the girls in Knock Knock. She's pretty. I'm just going to say it. Spoiler alert.
Knives Out as well. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, of course. How did I not click on that? She plays kind of a broken character who stays in the hotel and who kind of befriends Ty Sheridan's character, and they have like a really nice connection. But of course, she's I spent a lot of film thinking she was a prostitute. Quite frankly, she's kind of cloaked in mystery and is involved with a married man, and of course he can't really understand any of this.
Yeah.
The film is pretty straightforward in what happens, but it's Ty Sheridan's performance was I couldn't stop watching him.
Yeah.
And there are some really nice sequences that are quite delicate sequences where things kind of spiral out of control, and of course he can't fully grasp what's happening and he can't really explain himself, but they all kind of handle quite deftly and with an emotional core that it never just gets really sentimental, and it never gets really ridiculous. And it was interesting watching this so close to The Fanatic, which is sort of a similar thing, but taking a completely different approach. And I think if anyone is a fan of Ty Sheridan, they should just watch it just for his performance. Maybe people who are much more, anyone in the world basically, who has more experience with Asperger's than me might think, nah, that's a Hollywood portrayal. But just as a character in the film, I was completely on board with him, and it made me think, yes, I need to watch more of your films, Mr. Sheridan.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of his, and my wife knows a lot about autism, so yeah, I think we'll be watching this one.
I'd be really
The Night Clerk.
The Night Clerk. I would love it if you did, because it would be awesome to see someone else's view with experience of it. You know how they see it. I don't want to say any more without spoiling it. The other thing I will say really quickly is Helen Hunt in this film. I haven't seen Helen Hunt in a film in a long time, and I thought she's 57, and I hope she's okay, because she looks old. Look, we're in this film, and I don't think she was made up, but she looks like she's aged about 15, 20 years since I last saw her in like What Women Want or whatever. She just looked slightly unwell, so I don't know. It was something...
the last film I saw her was probably about 10 years ago, and that was what was it called? I think it was called The Sessions or something like that, where she played a sex therapist, and that involved quite a lot of like quite frank nudity. And yeah, she didn't seem to have aged greatly there. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's.
It could have been just really good subtle makeup, but
Yeah.
it was distracting because I was watching the film thinking, I hope she's okay, because she seems to have, it was genuine concern. But but yeah, it's just Ty Sheridan's film all the way, and I really liked it. And I can imagine it's a film that will really slip under some radars. It seems really low budget, but I really liked it.
Well, good. And when was it made?
I've got a feeling like 2018. Yeah, very recently.
So he would have done like Ready Player One, which is obviously a massive Spielberg movie, and it's good that he's doing smaller, interesting roles like this. That's cool. Yeah. So, film of the week then.
It is a tough one to me. I mean, I'm looking at these now, and you've got stuff like The Devil in the Woods and Hide and Seek. Under Suspicion was good fun. Deadfall was okay. I really, really liked The Night Clerk, purely for his and Ana de Armas performances, but The Witch in the Window was a huge surprise. Like I watched it, I really clicked with that. So for me, it's going to be The Witch in the Window, which is on Shudder. And if you're not Rupert, you get your 7-day free trial. Boom.
Yeah, or just pay for the service. I suppose that's the other alternative. Yeah. Yes, I'll definitely be watching that. Yeah, and The Night Clerk as well. So for me, it can only be Cybertracker. No, not really.
Jesus Christ!
I forgot we even talked about that. Well, I've watched a few good ones today. You know, it was nice watching Out of Sight again. Triple Frontier was a nice one. Tron was. I think everyone has to see that because it's just so incredible. Given its context, it's so ahead of its time. Great, but I think Sightseers is the one, because that's the one most likely to slip under radars. So for anyone who's got any interest in kind of slightly weird, sort of very black comedy horror, then that is the one to catch if you can.
Nice. Another films with Leonardo DiCaprio in.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a slightly longer episode than usual, even though we people said, or maybe chop them up into smaller chunks. Boom, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, we reacted by just went, we'll go for the full hog, 180 minutes. Thank you very much.
I was surprised by how many films I've seen this week. To be honest, I don't know how, but yeah. So the films of the week: The Witch in the Window, and Sightseers. Although I do heartily recommend The Night Clerk.
Good. Well, hopefully this isn't my last one for a while. But yeah, keep bearing in mind that I may have a baby in the next week. Then I suppose it's possible that we won't have one next Monday. So, but I'll still be watching films. I'll still be racking up my list.
If not, it'll just be me for 90 minutes shouting into the void about Don the Dragon Wilson films. Watch Cybertracker 2, and never understanding that you're not there. Rupert, have you not seen it? Are you on mute?
Yeah, it's just the sounds of you adjusting your audio settings.
Barbarian Sound Studio. So
brilliant.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, awesome. And I'll speak to you soon, hopefully.
Okay. Farewell. I love you.
Bye. Bye then.